Isle of beauty, isle of splendor, isle to all so sweet and fair. All must surely gaze in wonder at thy gifts so rich and rare. Rivers, valleys, hills, and mountains, all these gifts we do extol. Healthy land, so like a fountain, giving cheer that warms the soul. Please remain standing as we invite Mr. August to the podium. He will lead us in prayer. Pastor August.
Let us pray. Father, we want to give you thanks for your goodness and your mercies today. Thank you. Your word reminds us that it is you in times past who chose Israel to be a covenant people. And your dealings with Israel have always declared you to be a God of purpose. Today, Father, we are thankful for what your word says about us. You said the earth is yours, your footstool. You remind us that heaven is your throne. And Father, as we gather here today, we pray as we commit to non-partisan interests. We are thankful today, Father, that the corrosive effects of systemic injustices would not be a part of our discussion, but that you would have your way through us and in us. We ask, O God, that as we commit, Father, for development of our nation in every aspect, that you will be present, because we commit everything that we do in your hands. And we are careful to give you praise, glory, and honor for all that you will do tonight. In Jesus' mighty name. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Darrell Bob. I'm the president of the Dominica Business Forum. I hereby invite Mr. Mackenzie Severn to do the opening remarks on behalf of the forum. May I say thank you so much for coming. We do expect many more persons to join us here this evening, but thank you as we encourage everyone to keep this discussion clean, fair, without any aggression at all. This is what we want to achieve here. I think that environment will allow us to be much more productive. So I thank you for coming, and I already thank you for the best behavior, the best words, and everything that will help us develop ourselves beyond today. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Good evening, Honorable Prime Minister, Honorable Attorney General, Mr. Levi Peter, other members of the head table, Pastor Randy Rodney of Evangelical Association, Mr. Nicholas George from the Electoral Reform Coalition, Mrs. Noelis Knight, the President of the Dominica Bar Association, and Mr. Darrell Bob, who is the President of the Dominica Business Forum, Inc. All the ministers of government and public servants who are here with us, we are indeed grateful for your company at this event this evening. Members of the media, DNO, Matt in the morning, and which one? The hot seat? Or talking block. And all the members of the public who are here and those listening to us on radio or on the World Wide Web. It is in fact a pleasure to be here this evening. Mr. Prime Minister, it seems like you throw a googly on us. Yes, so we in the Dominica Business Forum are very pleased to have quite a number of government officials here. And we are hoping that we will do justice to the topic at hand. to prevent myself from going off script, I took a few minutes to just present a prepared statement which will keep me on track and to be politically correct. So, let me recognize and appreciate the presence of all of you. Up until Monday morning, that's 2 days ago, it appeared that we were going to cancel this activity or proceed only with the representative of the Bar Association. Because the Bar Association was the only one among all those who invited who had responded to us and confirmed the participation. We had some acknowledgements, but we did not have a confirmation. And we were at the verge of calling it off because we had not gotten the response that we had anticipated. So we initially got responses like, I have not seen the invitation, I will inform my other members, it clashes with our radio program, we will get back to you, I am too busy with Calypso, so I don't have time for that, and just the absence in some cases of basic courtesy to respond to a formal invitation. Therefore, from this experience, it is quite clear that lack of interest in the electoral reform process may not necessarily be on the part of the general population, but unfortunately it looks like it is on the part of the leaders of some of the organizations who represent the population. So I'm here this evening in my capacity as the immediate past president of the Dominica Business Forum, Inc., and I was preceded by Mr. Stuart Paris, then president of the Builders and Contractors Association of Dominica, and Mr. Jeffrey Baptiste, the former president of the DAIC. So the present membership of the Dominica Business Forum is the Dominica and DBF, Dominica Employers Federation, BCAT, that's the Builders and Contractors Association of Dominica, the DCSI, the Dominica Coalition of Service Industries, the DMA, Dominica Manufacturers Association, the DHTA, Dominica Hotel and Tourism Association, and the OECS, the Business Council. So these are the affiliate members of the Dominica Business Forum. With this type of membership, it is quite clear that the DBF is not a political organization, and we are not affiliated to any political party. And maybe the landscape of the audience here tonight might testify that it appears so. So, Mr. President, if Mr. Prime Minister, if you're surprised, I am not. That's why we were considering cancelling when we. The private sector in Dominica has historically suffered the brunt of the effects of any breakdown in law and order in Dominica, whether it is the burning of enterprises, as witnessed in 1979 and 2017, or the looting after Hurricane David and Maria. So mindful of this unfortunate possibility, the Dominica Business Forum Inc. initiated the electoral reform group, which comprised of Anthony Libna, chairman, Randy Rodney, Father Nigel Frank Karam, the late Curtis Augustus, Stuart Paris, Ashley Joseph, Mary Roberts from the Bar Association, Thomas Later from the DPSU, and myself. The group was ably supported by His Lordship Gabriel Maziar and the Methodist minister and the entire Christian Council, with whom we met on a number of occasions in 2019. The Electoral Reform Group convened numerous consultations with a wide cross-section of society and all political parties, including the governing Dominica Labour Party, the parliamentary opposition of the time, at the time, the United Workers' Party. And we had public discussions right here at the DPSU, at one of which the Honorable Attorney General attended. So in August of 2019, the Electoral Reform Group submitted its report with recommendations for electoral reform to the Government of Dominica and to the OAS, CARICOM, and the Commonwealth Secretariat Mission, who was at that time visiting in response to an invitation to the Prime Minister for the assistance in resolving what had become an impasse. So when Sir Dennis Byron was engaged as a consultant to review the legislation of the electoral legislation, the Dominica Business Forum, Inc. is on record as being the only civil society organization to engage Sir Byron in public consultation. And after the submission of his final report, the DBF Inc. convened the national consultation again to review Sir Dennis's report in collaboration with other civil society organizations. A number of recommendations were made to enhance the Sir Dennis Byron report, which was presented at the consultations which were convened by the Government of Dominica at the State House in August of 2023 and was formally presented to the Prime Minister in September 2023 with our recommendations. So at that time, the Dominica Business Forum Inc. recommended to the Prime Minister the establishment of a broad-based committee to review all recommendations made at the consultations to arrive at some level of consensus. So this evening, ladies and gentlemen, after witnessing an apparent silence since the Prime Minister presented the three electoral bills for the first reading in Parliament, and he promised to return to Parliament for the second and third reading, which will in effect be the electoral laws of the land, since we expect it to pass, the DBF Inc. has reluctantly convened this public discussion amidst a high level of skepticism on both sides of the political spectrum. We in the Dominica Business Forum Inc. understand that electoral reform can only be achieved through the contents of the electoral bills that go before Parliament. All the protests for electoral reform boil down to one thing: the electoral bills. If what we are protesting for are not in the bills, and they are allowed to be approved in Parliament without trying to have it done, the protests would have been futile. So, the Government of Dominica has given the public, a window of opportunity to review the bills and make recommendations before the second and third reading before Parliament. So therefore, the DBF Inc. has taken the offer to review the bill seriously and notes the Prime Minister comments that he is not involved in any more consultations, and for us, this is okay. We, the citizens, that have to be interested in consultations and the amendments of the bills. The government and its 19 parliamentarians have everything at their disposal to move forward and pass the bills. So those who are not satisfied with the current bills, this is your window of opportunity to impress on the government that the absence of campaign financing, as proposed by Sir Dennis Byron, is unacceptable, and we think that it should be included in the legislation or any legislation that goes before Parliament. And if some of the other vexing issues are not addressed, it may very well prolong the campaign for electoral reform beyond the passage of the bills. There are other issues identified in the DBF Inc. submission, and therefore I have the opportunity to call on Mr. Darrell Bob, who is the president of the Dominica Business Forum, who will present to you the recommendations which the DBF Inc. came up with in collaboration with other stakeholders and presented to the Prime Minister in September 2023. We have some concerns, and I do not want to insert my personal feelings into this forum tonight. But there are some things that we mentioned in the recommendations that we made from the very beginning. Because we believe that after 49, almost 47 years of independence, we are into the 47th year of independence, if we are for the first time reviewing the electoral bills or legislation of the country, we should take some time and review it in a mature way and try to cover as much ground as possible. And unfortunately, we do not find that, we do not believe that enough attention was given to some other critical things that are important to the development of the nation. And let me only mention 3 of them. One, we do not believe that the electoral reform process for the electoral bill should be done in isolation to the constituency reform. Because when the constituencies were demarcated in the 1970s, the road network and even the human settlements were quite different. And I'll give you one example. I live at Coptown. My office is in Virgin Lane. When I leave Virgin Lane, I am in Roseau Central. When I cross the Baffin State Bridge, I am in Roseau South. When I get to Louisville, I am in Roseau North. And when I get to Coptown, I'm in the Roseau Valley. 4 constituencies in 2 miles. If I were to, I have absolutely no intention to contest elections. I tried it once and I really didn't like it, for the Labour Party. If I were to contest an election in the Roseau Valley, for example, I would have to go through Roseau North, go through Roseau South, go through Roseau Central, go all the way to Kenfield and up to Cochrane to campaign in the other part of my constituency. So we believe that these things were left out and they were never discussed in the debate, they were never mentioned in all the discussions that took place. Right? There is another vexing issue that we mentioned, and I think Darrell Bob will make mention of it in his deliberations in the 27 points that we're taking. Is some of us who take our votes very seriously feel very offended and insulted when we vote for one candidate in one party and then this candidate jumps to the other. These things were not taken care of. And in fact, the Dominica Business Forum did in fact bring in some of these issues in the discussions that we were having and the recommendations that we made. So there are other things that will come out of Darrell's intervention with the recommendations from the Dominica Business Forum. So at this stage, I just want to remind you that we are going to try to keep on target, keep focused on the bills and the amendments that we believe that should be included. But we just thought in this introduction, we will give an overview of some of the general concerns, because I believe that sometime not into the too distant future, we are going to have to address the other issues of constituency boundaries and some of the other burning issues related to electoral reform and electoral legislation in Dominica. So thank you very much for allowing me this opportunity and listening to me for the few minutes that you gave me. And at this stage, I want to call on Mr. Derek Bob, but I think I have to do, if you just allow me to pull it up on the computer for him. Oh, Derek, can you do it on your phone? No? You can? Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, Derek Bob, President of the Dominican Business Forum.
Thank you, Mr. Mackenzie. Though protocol has already been established, but let me say special thanks and good evening to the Prime Minister. Thank you to the AG, Mr. Peter, Mrs. Knight, Mr. George, Pastor Rodney from the head table. Thank you for being here with us this evening. And to you for coming out in such large numbers. To achieve the overarching goals of free and fair elections that would preserve the Commonwealth of Dominica's constitutional right to choose its government, and even more importantly, to preserve the rule of law in Dominica. The Dominica Business Forum, Inc., in collaboration with the organizations and individuals who participated in the review process at the National Consultation on August 3rd, 2023, at which Sir Dennis Byron made a presentation, proposes the following. Friends, there are about 26 of them. 1. The voters list should be cleansed annually, not merely of deceased persons, but also of anyone who has not been ordinarily resident in Dominica for at least 5 years. 2. Unless otherwise provided, the right to vote is limited to a citizen of Dominica of 18 years or older, who is ordinarily resident in Dominica at the time of the calling of the election. 3. For the purpose of this election, the definition of ordinarily resident is as follows. Ordinary resident means a regular and habitual mode of life in Dominica, as opposed to a temporary sojourn, vacation, visit, or transitory presence. Does not include the provisions involving Commonwealth citizens, which remain unchanged. Number 4, there shall be no overseas registration of voters. However, confirmation of overseas voters should be done on a thorough basis with the production of a government-issued identification card or a passport by the voter. 5, the Electoral Commission shall have the authority to remove from the voters list the names of all persons who have not resided in Dominica for a minimum of 5 years. 6, Dominicans who are ordinary resident overseas, who are 18 years or older, can vote in 2 virtual constituencies to elect representatives who would represent the interests of Dominica and Dominicans abroad. This provision would involve a constitutional change. 7, on the day of election, it is an offense for an elections officer to ask a voter for his or her ballot before the voter places the ballot into a ballot box. 8, general elections shall be held on a fixed date every 5 years. The provisions would involve a constitutional change. 9, the Constitution should provide a hybrid system of first past the post and one of proportional representation as a counterweight against the concentration of and abuse of power by any leader and his or her party. A similar constitutional change was recommended by the Honorable Justice Telford Georges in his 1999 constitutional report. 10, there shall be fixed limits on campaign spending, not merely during a report period, or rather a reporting period, but also during the 6-month period preceding such a period. Spending in each constituency by a candidate or political party is limited to $100 per person living in the constituency, subject to negotiations. 11, the breach of any provision of the legislation governing elections in Dominica is punishable by a fine, custody, or in appropriate circumstances, disqualification from contesting future elections. 12, All eligible voters in Dominica shall be issued voter identification cards. The voter identification cards shall contain biometric data, including but not limited to fingerprints. 13. Voting in more than one constituency by a voter during an election shall be an offense punishable by a term of imprisonment. There is no mention in Sir Dennis Byron's draft laws and regulations of the same. 14. The payment of air or sea travel for a person ordinarily resident abroad with the express or implied intention of having that person vote for a candidate or his or her party, or to refrain from voting, constitutes an offense of bribery punishable by a fine, custody, a term of imprisonment, or, where appropriate, disqualification from contesting future elections or elections. Acknowledged in Sir Dennis Byron's report, but omitted in the draft laws and regulations. 15. The payment of overseas or foreign entertainers by a candidate or political party to provide entertainment during an election with the express or implied intention of persuading voters to vote for the candidate or his or her party, or to refrain from voting, constitutes the offense of treating, which is punishable by a fine or a term of imprisonment, or, where appropriate, disqualification from contesting future elections. 16. A special prosecutor shall be appointed by an independent tribunal or body, rather than by the Attorney General, to prosecute any violations of the elections legislation. The Director of Public Prosecution shall have no jurisdiction to prosecute election offenses. There is no mention of this in Sir Dennis Byron's report. The Director of Public Prosecution shall no longer have the authority to intervene in a prosecution involving the alleged violation of Dominica's elections laws, or to nolly prosecute any such case before the courts. There is no mention of this by Sir Dennis Byron, despite the CCJ's decision of July 2022. 18. The Electoral Commission shall, upon the issuing of the writ for an elections, consult with the electronic and the print media in Dominica to draw up a timetable for political broadcasts and access to print media for political candidates to promote their views through the electronic media, and to have their messages printed in the newspapers. A similar provision appears in the Representation of the People Amendment of Act of Antigua and Barbuda. 19. The owner of a private radio station who is convicted of failing to comply with this legislation shall be punishable by a fine not exceeding $10,000 for each offense, for discussion and review. 20. The composition of the Electoral Commission shall be amended or expanded to include an additional complement of 6 members. These additional members shall be nominated by civil society organizations, including, but not limited to, the business sector, the religious sector, the Bar Association, public service sector organizations, women's organizations, and local government, and shall be appointed by the President of the Commonwealth of Dominica. Sir Byron made such recommendation for future discussions. 21. Subject to paragraph 20, any member of the Electoral Commission who provides any service to the government of Dominica for consideration other than being a member of the Commission shall be disqualified from serving as a member of the Commission. For example, 3 members of the existing Commission are citizenship by investment agents. 22. A fixed amount of money shall be annually allocated to the Electoral Commission by the government of the Commonwealth of Dominica to enable it to exercise its duties and responsibilities, as recommended by the Electoral Commission, to be disbursed to the Commission within a period not exceeding 60 days after the National Budget Address. Sir Dennis Byron made reference to this issue. 23. The political leader of each political party contesting an election shall engage in at least 3 debates prior to the election. There is no mention in Sir Dennis Byron's report of the same. 24. Each candidate of the major parties contesting a general election who is not a political leader must engage in at least 1 debate with other candidates in the constituency or he or she is seeking to represent during the reporting period of the election. There is no mention in Sir Dennis Byron of the same. 24, or rather 25. Any candidate who wins an election as a representative of a political party and intends to switch to another political party, whether in government or opposition, shall resign as a parliamentarian and participate in a by-election to allow the electors to approve the decision to switch sides. There is no mention of this by Sir Dennis Byron. 26. If only 1 candidate is nominated in a constituency to contest an election on nomination day, the Electoral Commission shall extend the nomination process by a further 7 days to allow other persons the opportunity to be nominated. If no other person is nominated, the sole nominee shall be declared duly nominated, unopposed. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you. This has been our place.
Thank you, Darrell. So, ladies and gentlemen, this overview that Darrell presented was what the Dominica Business Forum came up with in 2023 as our submission to the process. Since then, we have actually fast forward, and there are as you can see, when we looked at the electoral process legislation in Dominica, we took a global view of the situation, hoping that it would be, we would be looking at the electoral reform process, not with just a few things that people were talking about, which was voter ID cards and registration and those type of things. We tried to broaden the discussion, that we could talk and see how we could actually bring a certain level of sanity to the electoral process by reviewing with a broad mind. Unfortunately, this did not happen, and we are where we are today. So this presentation of Darrell Bob, we are hoping that we do not have to spend time on it tonight, except for the relevant items or sections that he mentioned that are relevant to the matter at hand, which is the bill going to Parliament and what is practically possible. So at this stage, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to present to you the next presenter on behalf of the Dominica Evangelical Churches, Mr. Dr. Randy Rodney. Pastor.
Thank you, Mr. Severin. And we acknowledge the presence of all of you people here this evening. Of course, the Honorable Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of Dominica and the Cabinet of Ministers and the cadre of people that are here this evening for that conversation. Let me just say for clarity that I'm here as the immediate past president of the Dominica Association of Evangelical Churches, having demitted office on the 6th of December last year after 3.5 terms. And I just want to make sure that I say that here for, the whole question of terms. The current president is Pastor Matthew Geese, who has gracefully taken over the leadership of the association. Ladies and gentlemen, the DAC is mindful that the issue of electoral reform in Dominica, in our view, has been an unnecessarily long process. And we hope that with the advent of the 3 bills that will go to Parliament, we can once and for all put this matter to rest in what we expect to be a very equitable application of the law. Government was instituted by God as his servant for civil control of law and order. Romans chapter 13 and verse 1 through 5 makes government. Thanks for listening. Romans chapter 13 verses 1 through 5 makes government officials God's instruments to accomplish his purposes for good civil control. In any functioning democracy, the authority of the government can only derive from the will of the people as expressed in genuine, free and fair elections held at regular intervals on the basis of universal, equal and secret suffrage. Chapter 1 of the Constitution of Dominica begins with the following: whereas every person in Dominica is entitled to the fundamental rights and freedoms. And I highlight that phrase to already put in our minds that the body of laws that governs this geographical location seek to govern those who ordinarily resident in Dominica. In fact, I take note of one comment of the Honorable Prime Minister some time ago in one of his interviews where he suggested that you can't live in some part of the US and call a power rep in Dominica to fix your roads. And I think that statement was right. I think that's on the record, sir. Yeah. Okay, but I think that's on the record and I'm sure I can provide it for you. I can send it to you so in your own voice. Okay. If you said you didn't say it, I humbly apologize. We are grateful, ladies and gentlemen, that the executive branch of government has recognized that the electoral process needs revamping. And so Sir Dennis Barron was engaged in the process. Before him, Madam Mia Motley. And we have gone through several processes because there's a recognition that we need revamping. Today, we are looking at the 3 draft bills that are to go to Parliament. One dealing with the Electoral Commission, the second with the House of Assembly Elections Act, and the third with the Registration of Electors Act. In my short presentation, I will not go to detail the act. I've read all of them, and I've read all the previous acts. What I will attempt to do is, in summary, provide what the Evangelical Association Executive believes that we must be looking at. One, the registration of electors. Ladies and gentlemen, we understand that elections are for the purposes of representation. And sometimes we hear conversations that are passionate about remittances and family, and so on. Elections are essentially about representation. What does representation mean? It means that whoever sits in the executive branch of government, in the parliament, represents people in a particular location. Hence, in Dominica, we all agree that our elections list, as it is currently, in a state where it exceeds our current or our supposed current population, needs looking at. In 2019, when I was asked to serve with the electoral reform group, we did an exercise utilizing the available data, births and deaths, and population and an average number of those under 18. And in essence, we concluded that the electoral list should be somewhere in the region of 45 to 48,000 people. If you looked at those who are ordinarily resident within the age group that is voting. Hence, we ask that we probably take a look at the Antigua model, where a complete registration of electors was done in about 3 months. And Antigua has a population, and my understanding is that is much higher than ours. That concludes that we could do ours in much less time. A complete re-registration of electors who are ordinarily resident in Dominica. We look at the question of the National Voters ID card, and I think the executive agrees that we need some sort of voter identification. And I've heard arguments that there are certain areas where we don't need it, certain countries don't use it, and so on. But in Dominica in particular, we live in a place where we all know that we have an influx of people. They're black like us, they look like us, and they can represent us. And it's only fair in this day and age where every person is looking for ID. In fact, 2 IDs are required in certain aspects for certain transactions, that we have an ID for voting. Why? Because elections in any country is the most consequential thing that any country can have. In fact, I'm subject to correction by the legal people here, but you have a constitution that can be changed because of elections, because of who is in the parliament, right? So that elections is probably the most consequential thing that any nation can have. Hence, the importance of a voter's ID card with all the necessary biometrics to make sure that John is John and Jane is Jane. Thirdly, the constitution of the Electoral Commission. In the Dennis Byron report, we note that the composition of the commission as is, and those were his words in the report, does not make for fairness, independence, and objective reasoning. We suggest that the composition of the commission be extended so that there is no unfair advantage, if you like, whether it's by the incumbent or opposition in any case, right? So that the commission truly operates as an independent body that will provide the kind of leadership that we require in Dominica for elections. In our view, one of the most critical areas is the area of campaign finance reform. And that is so because campaign finance reform and all the other matters, you can find a nexus that links all of them, right? In other words, if one set of people are allowed to use any amount of cash for elections, it means, ladies and gentlemen, that those elections can be changed because of the injection of finance. A few years ago, when I worked along with the Roman Catholic Church on the whole issue of crime and violence in Dominica, one of the presenters presented to us the value of drugs, for example, that was being transshipped through the Caribbean. And one of the notes that the presenter made was that the value of drugs that was coming through the Caribbean could buy any government. That for me was astounding. I've never forgotten that because it changed my perspective on the kind of financing from nefarious sources that can have impact. I'm not saying that that's happening here in Dominica at the moment. I am saying that finance finance, and whether if there is no campaign reform finance, the possibility exists. And so we propose, and this is now updated, we propose that we take a look again at the Jamaica model. Right? The Jamaica model that was just instituted, I've read it as well, and there are certain things that I have questions about. But I believe in Dominica we can take a look at the Jamaica model and begin to look at campaign finance reform as something that we need to include in this cycle of the reform. Let me quickly say that we do not believe that every problem that we have with elections as is now can be addressed immediately. We have already heard the Prime Minister say that we'll go to Parliament in the first quarter with the bill. And we do not believe that everything that we think should be addressed can be addressed at that sitting of Parliament. We believe that some of the critical areas should be addressed. Some of the areas we know and believe would require constitutional amendment. And from the association's perspective, and I'm sure some of you here would have already received our correspondence since 2022. We didn't get a response though, but we sent it, signed by 20-something pastors, and we still are asking that the government of Dominica through the Parliament relook at the fact that according to the Constitution, a minister of religion is not able to contest elections. And I personally take offense. I take offense, and I'll tell you what. I take offense because that sentence which the Prime Minister is along with a prisoner. Actually, the Minister of Religion statement is right under those who are in prison. And I think that is something to be looked at. And it's a constitutional matter, and I think it should be looked at. Dominica is the only country, for those of you who are grumbling, Dominica is the only country in Caribbean where that law still exists. Okay? We noted in Barbados, the last election cycle, that a gentleman who spreads on many of our politics in Dominica, who contested the elections for the Labour Party then, resigned and became the leader of the opposition. He is the bishop of the Christian Union churches in Barbados. And that's just one of the examples. And I know people all over the Caribbean who are ministers of religion. And so we propose that. So probably something to think about. Certainly, like I said, not at this stage, because it would require a constitutional amendment for us to do that. And yes, sir, many people would like to contest. I believe that God calls certain people for certain places. And we also believe that godly people make better politicians. Okay? In conclusion, sir, the laws governing every civilized country, if the law is watered down or ignored, if the wishes of the people are sidelined, chaos is inevitable. When we were asked to sit with the Dominica Business Forum along with the other parties in 2019, what stood out to us was that the business community was concerned, and we sided with the concern, that if there is any eruption of violence, the business people suffer. When the business people suffer, the citizens suffer. And as an association, we believe that we had to put our hand in there to make sure that that didn't happen. I am satisfied that over the years, even with this electoral coalition, that we have done everything possible to simmer people down in terms of managing their anger and managing themselves as far as that's concerned, right? We present them with information and the truth, but we do that. The church encourages all, the government now, the incumbent, to continue or to enact just laws. Why just laws? Because every one of us will become under the gun of the law at some point. And if the law is unjust now on sides one set, when the tables turn, somebody else will be aggrieved. So everything we do, we must expend every effort to ensure that the laws are fair for everybody and just. Finally, the Dominican Association of Evangelical Churches believe profoundly that when we get to the place where we can enact fair laws that will not advantage or disadvantage any group or sect, like we do for every other legislation, then we will, all of us, be promoting a fair and just society, as mandated to us in the book of Matthew chapter 23. There are three things that Scripture requires us to pay attention to: justice, mercy, and faith. Thank you very much for this opportunity, Dominic.
Thank you very much, Pastor Randy Rodney. Okay, we did invite a youth representative from the National Youth Council. Unfortunately, the president said he was very much involved with Calypso and he didn't have time for this one. And they didn't send a delegate. And we also invited the Dominican Public Service Union, but it clashed with their radio program this evening. And they said they would have sent somebody. So just in case the person from the Dominican Public Service Union is there, okay. So it doesn't seem that the representative for the Dominican Public Service Union is there. So we move forward to the representative of the Electoral Reform Coalition. Let me only give a quick overview of where we are. Daryl Bob gave a summary of the recommendations that we made after Sir Dennis Byron presented his report and after the consultations. After the consultations of 2023, and the Dominica Business Forum submitted a copy to the Prime Minister in September, we noted that our job since 2019 was over. So we took a back seat. And as I said, it is because of the silence since the 16th of December that we thought that this evening's activity, we should step forward again and organize it. But when the Dominica Business Forum is up with the responsibility, because I believe that we had many more pressing things to do with our jobs and our commitments, a new group sprang up after the snap elections were called in 2022. And this new group is the Electoral Reform Coalition. And when the Prime Minister presented the draft bills in May of 2024, the ERC came together again with a number of stakeholders and reviewed the draft bills that the Prime Minister submitted and came up with another set of recommendations. And what they did in this case was to make an analysis of the existing laws, what Sir Dennis Byron recommended, and to see what they believe should be in the bills. So this is what Mr. Nicholas George, who is the Secretary of the ERC, Electoral Reform Coalition, so he's going to concentrate on the bills that the Prime Minister presented and the recommendations that we made as far as those bills are concerned. So right now I have the opportunity to present to you Mr. Nicholas Judge.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, Honorable Prime Minister, Cabinet Ministers, and I have the pleasure of welcoming government ministers that were colleagues of mine. So I'm proud to be here in this forum this evening. Mr. Moderator, I thank you for the invitation extended to me to represent the Electoral Reform Coalition at this evening's panel on electoral reform, specifically addressing proposed amendments submitted to the government for inclusion in the draft bills introduced in Parliament and the first reading of the said bills on Monday, 16th December 2024. This panel discussion is an historic one that will be recorded in the annals of Dominica for having started the process of introducing civil and respectful discourse in the national growth and development of the Commonwealth of Dominica. I am humbled to be present when the road to the attainment of true peace and tranquility was introduced in the affairs of state. Tonight's event begins to usher in the values of respect, accountability, and good governance on this island, thereby leading to it being referenced as the nature and most peaceful isle of the Caribbean. In the interest of time, I shall only highlight the areas of concern of the Electoral Reform Coalition that we want the government to address by having the proposed amendments from us form part of the electoral reform bills now introduced before Parliament. And right at the outset, I want to make a call on behalf of the ERC for the appointment after this evening's event for a technical team to discuss the recommendations that we will speak of here, so we can fine-tune the recommendations and come to consensus before we go back to Parliament for the second and third readings. From the Registration of Electors Act of 2024, we read the right to vote. And Section 6.1 of that bill stipulates the conditions for electors to exercise their rights to vote. The ARC is proposing 6.1c, and it should read that the qualified requirements is that a citizen of Dominica should be resident or domiciled in the country. We want that amendment added to what exists now. And that is consistent with Section 33(2)(a) of the Constitution of Dominica. A voter identification card. This is represented in the present act. Interestingly, we've asked from the Electoral Reform Coalition that the requirements from an elector to the registration officer be statutorized. What it is that it's like if you're applying for a passport, you know what it is you must bring to the Chief Immigration Officer. What we see in the regulations of the draft bills presented by the government is a picture of what a card would look like. But there's no stipulation as to what you must present to the Chief Registering Officer. And interestingly, whilst Form 7 of the regulations references voter identification card, the sample card in that act currently says national identification card. So we must decide which nomenclature we are going to use. Confirmation of registration of an elector. It comes similarly to that of the requirements for the voter ID card. Requirements, there are stipulations on how you should vote, how you should get registered, but there is no statutorization of the requirements. We are asking the government to look at that. That the requirements, whatever it is that the elector is being asked to present to the chief registering officer, must be statutorized, it must be stipulated in law, and not left to the discretion of any other officer. That we would like to discuss in a technical meeting, a meeting of technical people. Under clauses 54 to 68 of the House of Assembly Act, any person, political party candidate who provides free musical concerts and similar events featuring international artists by political parties, their agents, candidates, or acts, we are asking that be deemed as acts of treaty. And I'm not going to go over all of this because I'm going to present this to the government. The government already has this. So I'm just going over it in this forum. But we want this technical team to be set up where we can fine-tune it, agree and disagree, and then get to consensus and present this thing to Parliament. So nobody has to go and spend any time, rain or shine, outside of Parliament, not expecting the government to do what it would have promised us that it would do. So, and then I will go to a vexing issue, and it is the issue of campaign finance. Campaign finance has been spoken of, and I'm just going to say that if we pass bad law in Parliament, we're going to have bad governance. At a different forum, Mr. Prime Minister, I invited the Minister of National Security to join me in beginning to change the political system that we have in Dominica. Because that system now is too divisive. It breeds hatred, it breeds enmity in our society, and it filters from the top to those of us at the bottom of the societal pole, and the results are criminality. And then we find sociologists to tell us why. But some of it comes from the top, and we need to change that, we need to change. So similarly, on campaign finance reform, what I want to say here is that the importance, it is not whether one party has more money or the other. It is that when you pass the law and you have campaign, if you were the recipient of $5 million from a donor, the reasonable expectation is that that donor would expect a favor. And that favor is going to come at the expense of good and accountable governance of the country. And it will lead to corruption in the governance of the country. One area, the issue of giving no-bid contracts to people. Campaign finance regulation keeps us honest. We really do not need all that money that we are spending in our constituencies to convince people to elect us into office. And when we are elected, we can continue the business of government without having to be looking over our shoulders to give back to people who have corrupted us in getting elected into the system. Elections have consequences. Unregulated campaign finance allows corrupt, irresponsible, unaccountable, divisive governance. Let's have campaign finance. And the question is, why did the government jettison all the provisions of campaign finance contained in Sir Dennis Byron's recommendations in the draft act? Why? Why did the Attorney General's office did not recognize this and keep it? We need a debate on that, we need discussion on that. Dominica is only 72,000 of us. We can lead our government, and we can lead our country without all this that goes on with unregulated spending of finance. My other point of contention, what I want to say here is that all of the sections, I think it's close 64 to 74, that were in Sir Dennis Byron's draft act be reinserted in the draft bills that are before Parliament. All of it. But if there are any bits that are to be removed, let's have a technical discussion on that. But let us introduce campaign financing in our legislation in 2025. Similarly, we've gotten a new bill, the Electoral Commission Bill. Great, because the Commission did its work directly from the Constitution before. Now we have a bill. And there was a recommendation from Sir Dennis Byron on the composition of the Commission, not in terms of the numbers, because he recognized it was a constitutional provision and therefore it would take a lot to amend the Constitution. So he suggested and recommended that the appointing, nominating authorities, the President, the Prime Minister, and the Leader of the Opposition may wish to consider people from academia, civil society, church-based organizations, and at least one woman. Your cabinet, sir, is filled with women. And there was a time when I wondered whether the men had a place in governance in Dominica, because when Ms. Charles was in government, the judge was a woman, or almost every permanent secretary was a woman. So I'm sure, sir, you have nothing against women. But the recommendation by Sir Dennis Byron did not pass muster with the Honorable Attorney General. There are many women here tonight. It doesn't matter if it is a 5-member woman commission. Probably we would have better elections if we had a 5-member commission. Because the men, we know what it means when women come on our cases. We know that. We know what it means. So we have to be obedient to them. Let's return let's consider and return the recommendation of Sir Dennis Byron into the draft legislation. It does not have anything to amend the Constitution. It does not require an amendment of the Constitution. All he is suggesting is that we look at people who have a certain level of qualification. So when they are there in the commission, there's confidence built in the system that allows us to sleep well. Now we can trust, and on that word trust, It is a big thing for us. And for me in particular, the issue of trust. That is why we are here. We have a difficulty trusting what is presented in Parliament to us from this government. Let's return the provision. The age, the tenure of office of the Chief Elections Officer. The Constitution says that that tenure will end at 55 or any other age recommended by Parliament or passed in Parliament. So Dennis Byron recommended moving it from 55 to 65. And the government, the Attorney General, has retained 55. But socially, the government has taken us from retirement ages where it was optional to retire at 50 in the civil service, then 55, 60 it's legislative and compulsory, and then there's a bridging gap of from 60 to 65 to Social Security. So we are already down that road. What is so particular in the context of the Chief Elections Officer that the government couldn't recognize and say, we agree with that? That's a simple recommendation. Move the tenure of office from 55 to 65. Mr. Prime Minister, the Electoral Reform Coalition wishes to discuss with you and your select team before you go to Parliament for the second and third readings of the bill. And I want to say something here just before I end, Mr. Moderator. I am exceedingly pleased with the presence of the government officials here today. I am exceedingly pleased with your attendance at this forum, Honorable Prime Minister. And that is why I said in the beginning that I am glad to be part of that, because I am hoping that it is a wind of change in the way we conduct affairs in Dominica. And trust me, I am concerned. I am concerned. Because I'm going to close, I'm looking at an incident that happened in Jimmy. Every Dominican should take time and analyze the incident with Mr. Murthy and pray that it doesn't happen to us. And then we must take action to prevent it recurring in our country. We must take action. And it may very well be the kind of society that we are creating. Let us have a better society created under your leadership, and that would be your legacy. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Mr. Judge, on behalf of the ERC. Let me call at this time the President of the Dominica Bar Association with the presentation. I know what you're talking about. So we'll listen to the presentation from the Bar Association. Mr. Gladys Knight. Didier. Sorry about that.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Thank you to Dominica Business Forum for inviting the Dominica Bar Association. As everyone knows, I think from the beginning of the consultations on the electoral reform laws, the Bar Association has had a voice. We have written to the AG. We reviewed all of the laws. We reviewed the Sir Dennis Byron laws, or the draft bills as they were at the time. We wrote to the government with our views on them and our submissions on them. And since before the introduction of the bills were previously draft proposed laws, which were published on the government's website. We reviewed those as well. I believe they are the same bills that were put before Parliament. When the government published those proposed draft laws, The Honorable Prime Minister at the time indicated that there would be no further consultations on those draft laws. And even though there were no consultations, citizens could, of course, make their submissions in writing addressed to the Attorney General. And since then, those proposed drafts have become bills. The Bar Association feels that it is unfortunate that there were no consultations on the draft bills, or at least no consultations organized by the government on the draft laws which have now become bills. It is good that the Dominica Business Forum has put on this consultation, but we were disappointed that there was no consultation put on by the government. And the reason is this: the bills that are now before Parliament are at variance, very much so, with the Sir Dennis Byron drafts. So given that they are at variance, there needs to be proper explanation coming from the Parliament or from the government as to why the changes were made, and to give persons the opportunity, of course, to ask questions, to discuss those changes. I mean, it's really just the hallmarks of democracy, really, that those changes were made. Let us have a discussion on them. This is no ordinary bill. These are no ordinary bills. These are bills relating to elections in our country. I believe a previous speaker indicated it is one of the most important pieces of legislation in a country, in a democratic country. In keeping with our mandate, however, the Dominica Bar Association did write to the Attorney General with our observations on the then draft laws, which are now the bills. We met, we discussed them, and we wrote with our observations. In our submission to the Attorney General, we of course took the opportunity to commend the government on making strides towards electoral reform, and that must be done. At least something is now being done. We prefaced our submissions with the background that the Dominica Bar Association held a meeting of its members last year, July, to discuss the bills. This meeting was preceded by a meeting approximately a year earlier, on the 24th of August 2023, at which the Sir Dennis Byron proposed electoral reform laws were discussed at length. At the outset of our 11th July 2024 meeting, it was noted that the government of the Commonwealth of Dominica bills, the present bills, are, as I said, at variance with the Dominica Bar Association submissions of the year before. It was at variance on many key issues, and it was at variance with the recommendations of Sir Dennis Byron on those key issues. We pushed ahead with our meeting nonetheless, even without the benefit of an explanation to these variances. And we noted also that there was an absence of any formal report on the consultations that the government had held after the Sir Dennis draft bills had been published. So we had those consultations throughout the country, but there was no report coming from those consultations. There was no data coming from those consultations. So we were really at a loss as to why the changes were made. We will start with the bill for the Electoral Commission Act 2024. Now, we were invited here to discuss the bills, so we're going to go into the bills, so bear with me. The bill for the Electoral Commission Act of 2024. We noted that the statutory incorporation of the Electoral Commission as proposed by Sir Dennis did not feature in the present bills. Thus far, no explanation has been given by the government for the disposal of this particular recommendation. Is it that it poses a constitutional challenge? Is it that it is unnecessary? A discussion on the topic would have been welcome. Secondly, the structure and the composition of the Electoral Commission. This was a major point of variance between the present bill and the Sir Dennis drafts. The bill has removed from Section 3.2 and the first schedule of the Sir Dennis draft 1, provisions for the composition of the commission to include, for example, at least one female, which this president certainly supports, and 2, enacting qualification criteria that may be considered in making the appointment of members. And these were introduced in order to broaden the membership base of the Electoral Commission away from party political considerations. These were recommendations made by Sir Dennis which were welcome. They were novel and they were welcome. The reason as to why these recommendations were ignored, we are not sure. But in our view, they bolstered the diversity, integrity, and independence of the Commission. And moreover, they did so without coming into collision or conflict with our Constitution. We strongly recommend, as we did in our original submission to the government, that the proposals in the Sir Dennis draft on this topic be adopted. At our meeting, some members also put forward the desirability of a constitutional amendment because it was recognized, even in judgments coming from our court, it was recognized that the way that commissions such as the Electoral Commission and the Boundaries Commission are appointed may have the appearance of bias in that these appointments are made by the Prime Minister, on the recommendation of the Prime Minister, and on the recommendation of the Leader of the Opposition. But this requires constitutional amendment, and so most members felt that it was not, at this stage, we did not need to do so. However, with regard to the constitution of the Commission, as well as the qualifications for membership, we certainly support that. 3, there are little things that are removed from the current bill that were in the Sir Dennis bill that we found very peculiar. So 2 of these little things are this. In the Sir Dennis bill, he says that the electoral, he proposed as one of some of the functions of the Electoral Commission to ensure that all candidates campaign in an orderly and organized manner, and to take measures for ensuring that the entire electoral process is conducted under conditions of freedom and fairness. These were deleted, and we were at a loss as to why. It seems fair enough. It seems very, there's nothing wrong with them at all. And in our view, they helped the act in terms of democracy and promoting fairness and reasonableness. We are not sure why these were deleted. We also noted the change in the prescribed age for vacating the office of the Chief Elections Officer, as described by Mr. Nicholas George. We won't go into that, except that members did say that we were not sure why the decrease of the age from 65 to 55. 55 is still a very young age. Where most persons, of course, still have a lot to offer, and it is really who wants to go job auditing at the age of 55. Many of us here are close to that age. I don't think we would like to be put out of office simply because of attaining the age of 55. An Electoral Commission fund features in the bill, and that we commended. It was also recommended by Sir Dennis. We found it a good recommendation then. It still appears in the bill, and we support this as well. We know that Section 12.2, the possibility of the Commission receiving aids, grants, donations, or any other accruals to the Commission for the purpose of performing its functions was removed. We are supposing, or we may suppose, that this possibility could not stand if the Commission is not a corporation, as suggested by Sir Dennis, but again, we were not sure, and we thought that some clarity and explanation from the government would be prudent on this. We move to the Bill for the Registration of Electors Act 2024. Particularly Section 12 of the Sir Dennis draft, which is now Section 11 of the bills, of the government bills, has removed the 5-year absence as a cause for deletion of one's name from the register of electors. This is the most far-reaching variance in the government's bills. We noted on this, and in our original submissions we gave quite a bit on this particular point. But we noted firstly that in the surveys and consultations done by Sir Dennis, the removal of this proviso only showed up a few times. It was not something that was asked for by the majority of Dominicans in those polls and in those consultations. The majority of Dominicans did not ask for the removal of the 5-year absence disqualifying factor. What we asked for was an explanation, was something to be put into the legislation to define it further or to qualify it further, which is what Sir Dennis actually did in his bill. He defined it further by saying what a 5-year absence means. I believe he put in that it meant not being in Dominica for 2 weeks per year or something to that extent. So he put that in, and that is what Dominicans had asked for. So we are not sure why this was now removed. Again, it may be said that it was removed based on the consultations that took place, but we do not have the data as to what came out of those consultations, so we do not know. We found when you read the Sir Dennis Byron reports, you find that where there was a request for it to be removed altogether, but though that request mainly came from the government groups. It came from the government group as well as the Dominica Labour Party group. That's where it came, but not from his general polls. Secondly, members at the BAS meeting reiterated that in the unique circumstances of our small island state, the removal of this section has the potential to dilute the votes of resident Dominicans or Dominicans with residential ties, that is, persons who have not been absent for over 5 years. We said that care has to be taken that the rights of voters as it currently exists under our law, or as it exists under our current law, is not diminished. So we speak, of course, of disenfranchising Dominicans who do not reside in Dominica. We say if we confirm the votes of only persons who reside here, it's going to disenfranchise persons who do not reside here and who are qualified to be on the list. But we're not looking at the reverse side. What about the Dominicans who do reside in Dominica or have residential ties? If we open up the door to allow any and all Dominicans, you have not come to your home for 15, 20, 30 years, but yet you are allowed to vote. If we open up that door to allow these persons to now be confirmed on the list, then the effect would be diluting the votes of those of us who are here, of those of us who do have ties, of those of us who have the connection and who have been here, who have not been absent for 5 years. Well, Mr. Christian, that's your view. You don't believe it was nonsense, and several of the lawyers who attended don't believe it was nonsense. On this point also,
Mr. Christian, I would like to just ask you to be respectful and allow the presenter to present with this type of disrespectful statement. Or we have to ask the police to make you on.
Mr. Christian, I wouldn't let the police take you. Okay. And we also said on that point as well, in terms of being careful not to disenfranchise local Dominicans, we note that the Constitution itself says that the registration of electors has to be with such provisions as to residents as Parliament may prescribe. What does that mean? What is the definition of that? If you remove all residency criteria altogether, does that mean now that if you have 0 criteria as to residency, does that mean now that you are not doing as the Constitution says? Or does that mean that yes, there is wiggle room? In other words, it leaves so much in the air. When I was at school, and even when I first started practicing, my senior lawyer at the time said to me, you have to be careful when you draft a contract, do not craft wording that will invite a lawsuit. You don't draft a lawsuit, in other words. So what I'm saying here is that we have to draft with care. We have to be careful when we introduce these types of new provisions that we are not inviting a lawsuit. We are not inviting persons to say, I have been disenfranchised. You have not crafted this piece of legislation in alignment with the Constitution, and I am going to file a lawsuit. The courts are clogged enough. Okay, so we have to exercise care here. Section 11 of the Sir Dennis draft, or Section 10 of the government bills, propose, a national ID is proposed in the Sir Dennis draft, and it is now changed to a voter ID in the government bills, with a photo and appropriate security features. This, we found, was preferred and welcome for the reasons stated in our original submission. We noted that no other biometric data was required apart from your facial photo, and members had no strong opinions about this at all. In the Sir Dennis draft, there is a provision, or there is a clause that allows for the disclosure of information that you provide to the electoral office to be disclosed to other authorized officers. So you disclose information while you're registering to vote or while you're being confirmed to vote, and the Sir Dennis bill put in a provision that allowed the chief registering officer to disclose that information to another authorized officer, such as the Commissioner of Police or the Director of FIU. As to the reasons for that, we are not sure. But in the Sir Dennis bill, with that provision, he also put in a safeguard. And he said that that could be allowed only with an order of the court. So in other words, if another officer wanted your information from the electoral office, they had to make an application to the court, and the court would allow it or not allow it. What we found here in the government's bill is that that safeguard was removed. So the provision stayed, which allowed the disclosure to be made, but the safeguard of going through the court was removed. We are not sure why, except to say that we don't think that that safeguard should be removed. The court is there to protect the citizens. If I give my information to one officer of the state, I don't want it to just be shared around willy-nilly without the protection of the court. Again, if we understood the reason why it was deleted, maybe we might have a different opinion, but again, we don't know. We were not told. Section 48 of the bill states that the confirmation of registration shall be carried out by means of the technology-enabled voter registration system. Members put the question, is the technology-enabled voter registration system ready to go? Because this is in mandatory terms. It says the confirmation of registration shall be carried out by this system. If it is not ready to go, it means the confirmation will never take place. This is the meaning of this. So if it is not ready to go, we shall never have confirmation. So if we pass this bill in the terms that it is, it means that we have to be ready to go on day one. And if it's not there, which I don't believe there's been any announcement that it is there. Is it there, Minister? I don't know. It was amended? Okay, very well. Thank you very much, Mr. AG. Mr. AG informs that it was picked up after our correspondence and it was amended in the bill. So it says that it may, AG? May, very well. Confirmation of registration of persons overseas. This was removed, and we stated that there needs to be clarity on how qualified voters overseas will be confirmed. Will they be expected to visit Dominica during the confirmation period? If so, it should be expressly stated. In other words, in Sir Dennis's bill, he allowed for confirmation of overseas voters overseas. Okay, so we need to be clear that this will not be the case, or if it is the case, fine. On this, I want to say as well that if we do not allow voters, if we remove the 5-year absence disqualification, and we say that all persons who are presently on the list, basically once you're not dead, that's really what it's going to be. Once you're not dead, then you can be confirmed on the list. Now, this is what the bill is saying. Once you're not dead, you can be confirmed. It doesn't matter how long you're gone for. So if it allows all of these persons to be confirmed, and they all must be confirmed in Dominica, what it means is that only the persons who can afford to come to Dominica during the confirmation period will be confirmed. Only those persons who can afford to come, or whose tickets will be paid for them, or it's only those persons who will be confirmed if it is allowed only in Dominica. So while many people say that they should only allow the confirmation in Dominica, in my view, really and truly, if you're going to allow all persons to be confirmed, it should be made easy for everyone to be confirmed. If it requires being able to mail in your confirmation, whatever the case may be, but this really needs to be looked at. Okay, because you do not want a situation where I want to be confirmed, I only have this period of time to be confirmed, but I can't afford to come to Dominica to be confirmed. Okay, so we need to look at that. I think it's something that we really need to look at and see how it is going to actually operate in practice. You don't want a result that is undesired, or that may skew the election, the confirmed list. You don't want a result that's going to skew the confirmed list of electors. We noted also that no qualifications for confirmation are noted in either the bills, the GOCD Bill for Registration of Electors Act, or in its regulations. And we assume that there's no qualifications for confirmation because if you remove the 5-year absence disqualifying factor, it really just leaves being alive. So, I mean, it's not really a need to do it. But we still believe that it needs to be set out. How do you qualify to be confirmed? Set out the qualifications. So Dennis's bills did it, and we think that the present bill should do so also. Finally, the Bill for the House of Assembly Elections Act 2024 and the draft regulations, election and election petition rules. It was immediately noted here that the political campaign finance provisions, or Part 4, sections 54 to 75, were removed. It was observed, though, that interestingly, the objects and reasons listed in the draft bill still referred to these political campaign financing provisions. That's also in the bill as well, AG. That was not amended. Well, yes, I do want you to explain, certainly. We have heard, of course, some utterances by the Honorable Prime Minister where he indicated that these provisions were removed because it was felt that this matter ought to be dealt with at a regional level. I think this was said on radio. The bar meeting was of the view that for Dominica, this has been and remains a very important issue, as revealed in the surveys done and the polls done and the meetings held, the consultations done with Sir Dennis and his team. The fact that it is such a major issue may or may not be so for other jurisdictions in the region, but it is for Dominica. So it is unclear why it is preferred to deal with this particular issue of campaign finance at a regional level and not the many other issues under the electoral reform head. Further, Jamaica has already passed campaign finance laws in 2016, and Barbados also has some campaign finance expenditure regulations of its own. Suffice it to say that given the level of desirability by the populace as reflected in Sir Dennis's report, as well as recommendations by independent observer missions to Dominica, there ought not to be electoral reform without providing for this very important issue. Principles of democracy would support this view. It was also raised at our meeting that it was unfortunate that the nature of the provisions as proposed by Sir Dennis were misrepresented at the government-led consultations. They were represented at those consultations as provisions which required the citizenry to pay for political campaigns. This is not what Sir Dennis proposed in his draft bills. The provisions as proposed by Sir Dennis simply sought to limit expenditure by political parties, limit and or prohibit certain sources of funding, particularly from foreign states and illegal sources, and to ensure that the political parties account for their income and expenditure during campaigns. That was the nature of what was proposed by Sir Dennis. Had nothing at all to do with the citizenry having to pay for anybody's political campaign. Nobody wants that. So we maintain and repeat the position on campaign finance provisions, which we ourselves had set out in our original submissions made the year before, and referencing an annex by Mr. Julian Johnson, one of our members. He did an entire paper on the need for political campaign finance, which he surmises or which he concludes it meets international best practice with regard to elections. And that is the main reason why it ought to be introduced. And we request that the government reconsider the inclusion of campaign finance laws. We went on to say it is unclear in sections 26 through 37 or elsewhere in the bills or regulations how the voter ID card introduced in the draft Registration of Electors Act will be utilized or relied upon on polling day. In other words, it doesn't say what you do with the card. So it introduces the card, it says you have it, then what? It doesn't, the rules do not say how the card is going to actually be used. So this needs to be clarified or set out in the legislation. We noted that the GOCD bill does not directly address the vexing issue of transportation of voters from overseas by political parties. In our original submission, we stated this. The majority of members agreed that this was a serious issue which should be legislated against. It ought to be frontally dealt with in the legislation. The act itself of the transportation of voters from overseas by political parties has the appearance of impropriety and should be prohibited. So we're saying that it has the appearance of, even though the act says that, look, if you do this with the intent of bribing, then it is an offense. We are saying, well, to have to prove intent, it's going to be difficult. Just doing it, the act of doing it has the appearance of impropriety, and it is a vexing issue that we thought ought to be frontally dealt with in any legislation. The government's bills keep the election petition rules in substantially the same form as the Sir Dennis draft. While the Sir Dennis draft rules provided an improvement to the existing situation, we commented in our original submission that the petition rules should be given a modern approach, probably similar to the civil procedure rules now existing for High Court matters. The time frame needs to be shortened for the hearing of election petitions, and case management schedules and directions expedited. There ought to be a definite time period for the determination of petitions. The current proposed draft would therefore be improved with these points in mind. And we ended our submission on the draft laws by saying, in essence, we maintain and repeat the position set out in our original submission. And we attached a copy. While we respect that at the end of the day, it is for Parliament to decide on the legislation, given the far-reaching importance of these pieces of legislation to our governance, it is hoped that the submissions of the country's bar will not be ignored. And again, we reiterated that our legislative committee on the bar would be willing to commit to a detailed review and scrutiny of the pieces of legislation, preferably as part of a wider committee. And we stated this from the very outset. When we first made our recommendations, our proposals, we indicated, look, something like this, you need to sit down with a wider committee of stakeholders, go through the legislation line by line, and get it done. I mean, this has been our recommendation from day one. We reiterate it, and we hope that it will be accepted. Fine. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Ladies Didier, today, President of the Dominica Bar Association. So ladies and gentlemen, this is basically what the Dominica Business Forum is all about. To look at the information, look at the bills, do the necessary analysis, and you can see that the analysis was done on various fronts. And there are some slight differences in terms of the positions of the various organizations that have been represented here. So for example, there is a variance with the Bar Association on conservation and the ERC. So there are some differences, which is also different from what the government has proposed. So this is what this exercise tonight is all about. To look at the legislation that is going to Parliament. Think of the country first and not any political party. And to make the best decisions for the benefits of those of us who are living, existing today, and for our children and children's children of tomorrow, that we can leave something for them that they can be proud of without the tint of political party biasness. So we are really hoping that, I mean, a lot of people call me, text me, and send out information that, why are you all still talking about electoral reform? After these presentations tonight, I'm sure that many people, those who are here in the room tonight, and those who are listening on social media and the various radio stations, will agree that the information that we are sharing tonight on the electoral reform process in Dominica is something that was needed. What we are doing tonight was needed, so that we get a better understanding of what the electoral bills before Parliament mean to us and mean to us for the development of the country. And right now, we could almost say that the ball is in the court of the Prime Minister and his government as to whether we will be heard, we will discuss, we will agree to disagree, and come up with something that is acceptable for the people of the Commonwealth of Dominica, whether they are at home or abroad. So, we are not dictating to the government, this is what we want. We are saying that we have some differing views and suggestions and recommendations that we should sit and let us iron it out and arrive at a consensus. So I would be, time is for the Prime Minister to respond to what he has heard tonight and to tell us whether it is a situation where the bills are already done and the government will go to Parliament, or even we could say what we want. Or if there is going to be some type of accommodation where we can thrash out this thing to arrive at something for the country, for the Commonwealth of Dominica. So at this stage, let me take the opportunity to welcome to the podium Honorable Roosevelt Scarrett, the Prime Minister of Dominica. And let's go to this one.
Thank you. Well, based on what Mr. Sever said in his opening comments, the people who he invited had other more important things to do, and they couldn't have been here. And had it not been for the Prime Minister, the event would have been cancelled. And so I'm happy that I saved the day, on the night, and that we are here to discuss. I can say to all that we have taken note of all of the points. As a matter of fact, Darren Bob said he had 27 points, but he only gave 26. That's to the extent to which we took note of the points which everybody raised. So there was one shot. I am not here in my capacity as the leader of the Dominican Labour Party. I'm here in my capacity as the Prime Minister of the country and the leader of the Parliament. But I dare say that when people speak about they're representing that group and this group, there is no larger constituency that is represented in this country than the Dominican Labour Party. The Constitution is the supreme law of our country. It makes provisions for a parliament. And the Constitution gives the parliament the authority to pass laws in the Commonwealth of Dominica. That's always been the case. And it is parliamentarians, both elected and appointed as senators, who have had the authority to pass laws in Dominica. And so, I represent the constituency. I receive over 90% of the votes, and therefore I can say without any fear of favor or of contradiction that I do represent people. And so when we ask for data, we must also present our own data to those who speak. How many people are registered in your entity? How many were in attendance? Who agreed and who disagreed on this? And so let us understand that there has to be an appreciation for the parliament and parliamentarians and the government of the country, that it too and they too represent people. And we must not speak as if, well, we do not form part of the nation, and that whatever labor rights or supporters of the government would say at a forum are not important. These are citizens of Dominica, and everybody's voice and view must contend and must be appreciated. And let me tell you something, there's nobody in Dominica, priest, pastor, Muslim leader, whatever it is, ordinary citizen who is not politically aligned in Dominica. Every one of us is partisan in our approach, in our behavior, and our utterances. There's no doubt about it. It is interesting to note that people have no issue in us not including some things Mr. Bellis Byron recommended once it is okay with them. And they have issues with things that we do not agree with Mr. Bellis Byron, that they don't agree with because it doesn't suit their political agenda. Now, I just must contend. That's why in Parliament they say, ayes have it. If you want individual people to vote, you ask for a division. And you therefore you vote. And so, let us understand, my dear friends, we are here to seriously engage. I will make some general comments. The Honorable Attorney General will raise some specific issues and explanations and responses, and he may be supported by the Honorable Reuben Blackmore and Honorable Dr. Bates Henderson. I want to really recognize the head table and all of you present, and those following by live broadcast. And I want to thank the Dominica Business Forum for inviting me to participate in this dialogue and for creating an environment for amicable discussions on shared commitment to fairness, transparency, and trust in our democratic institutions. And I want to particularly single out Mr. Darrell Bob for his graciousness in all of the arrangements made for my attendance at this event. I want to thank you so most profusely. We wholeheartedly in the government agree that democracy and progress are deeply interconnected. And it is our collective responsibility to continuously work towards strengthening the democratic foundations upon which our nation stands. But I must take exception, though, to the suggestion in the invitation letter from the Business Forum that the consultative process on this matter has been insufficient. Such a claim, in my view, is unfounded and misleading. It is disappointing that some commentators on the issue of electoral reform continue to perpetuate the disingenuous narrative that the government has not provided adequate opportunities for consultation on the proposed legislation currently before our Parliament. The facts tell a different story. The record is clear. We have developed a comprehensive framework for reform that has been informed by extensive and unprecedented consultations with both domestic stakeholders and international partners, including the Commonwealth, the CARICOM, the OECS, and the Organization of American States. These consultations took us across the length and breadth of Dominica, with contributions from members of political parties, trade unions, business associations, youth-based organizations, and the diaspora, among other groups, and Dominicans and residents from every community. Many of you present here tonight actively participated in the consultations. Additionally, the reports and drafts of the legislation were made accessible to every citizen at every stage of the process. As we move forward, it is essential that we do so with integrity, guided by the facts and by the truth. Electoral reform is not merely a political issue. It is a national imperative that impacts every citizen and every sector of our society, including the business community represented here tonight. This matter demands the seriousness and respect it deserves. The government of Dominica firmly believes that the foundation of any democracy lies in its electoral process. We have long acknowledged the importance of meaningful and inclusive electoral reform and have taken decisive actions to modernize our electoral system. Again, the facts speak for themselves. In May of 2017, this government introduced the registration of electors and House of Assembly election bills for the consideration of Parliament. And anybody who had the opportunity to read those bills would recognize that they were far-reaching in a positive way and comprehensive in nature. We didn't hear any of these organizations speak to those issues in 2017. And we know what happened, why the bills were not passed. During the same period, after Tropical Storm Erica ravaged our country in 2015, the government of Dominica allocated over $2.6 million for the procurement of an ID card management system, including a maintenance contract, as well as for hiring additional staff to support the confirmation exercise and the issuance of ID cards. So since 2017, the equipment, the software, the machines have been sitting in the basement of the Electoral Commission building to implement the issuance of national ID cards and allow for electoral reform. Because the issues then and now were always about the quote-unquote bloated list, was always about the need for an identification card in Dominica to vote. Every time there is an opportunity, there's an inclusion of something else, something new, that was never part of the consideration. Never in our entire consideration there was a view to amend the Constitution to allow for electoral reform. And the things that people are representing here, including lawyers, they know that it is something to require constitutional reform. And there's a process enshrined in the Constitution to go about constitutional reform. And what we have to understand in this country is that elections are due constitutionally in Dominica by 2027 December. You're talking about 43 or 44 months. So the clock is ticking. We don't have time to waste. And this process cannot take away the Constitution, the provision of the Constitution. So let's not get ourselves involved in deliberate, and I'm not talking to you here on the head table, so don't get me wrong. I'm talking to the nation. Do not let ourselves appear to be deliberately slowing the process, hoping that election will come, and we do not yet have the electoral bills passed and electoral reform concluded in Dominica. And we've always made it clear that you do not need to touch the Constitution to achieve the desired objectives of having reform in Dominica. That we have said that there's a need in Dominica to review the Constitution. And we have made it public that this is the next step of the government to engage in a process of national consultation with a view to amending the Constitution of Dominica. And we should start with two documents, the Sir Telford George's document and the Sir Dr. Nicholas Liverpool document as a base to look at, rather than engaging consultants, because these two documents are very comprehensive in nature. And so this is what we're talking about. But we do not need to touch the Constitution to allow for electoral reform in Dominica. And this is not going to happen. We are not going to go and touch the Constitution to allow for electoral reform in Dominica. The bills are sufficient in our view to achieving those desired objectives. So, fast forward to 2024. We introduced the Electoral Commission Bill, the House of Assembly Elections Bill, and the Registration of Electors Bill for their first reading in Parliament, following an extensive consultation process. I have emphasized that interest groups like those represented here tonight still have the opportunity to review these bills and offer recommendations. And we welcome some of those recommendations that have been made here tonight. We remain open to constructive dialogue on this matter, which is why I am here today. And when people are quoting my position about consultation, my view and the view of the government was that we're not going to go to every village in Dominica as we did. It's not necessary. This is why we post the bills on the website, and we say anybody who has observations and suggestions, please send them to us. Send them to us, and we'll give consideration to them in an open and transparent and objective manner. But to go about and consulting again when we had comprehensive consultation, carried live on every opportunity, I believe that those who are asking for this are seeking to slow down the process, to stop it, and then election will come and they will say, scary, do not give us electoral reform done. That's the motivation. And we should not engage ourselves in this. We must be true to ourselves and to those we represent. And I can say to you without any fear of contradiction, I, as Prime Minister, I cannot wait to go to Parliament to pass the laws because I want electoral reform in Dominica. We want it, and we want it now. And delaying it unless Parliament passes the law will not be effective. No, let us go, let us rush. We should be rushing to Parliament. We should tell us, oh, why didn't you go this week? That's what we should be hearing here tonight. Why are you going next week? Cancel Carnival and go during Carnival time. It should be no electoral reform, no Carnival. We have to be friendly and joking in this spirit and keep ourselves active and so forth. So we are committed to this. However, recommendations must be reasonable and fair to all parties involved, particularly to the citizens of Dominica, who rightly expect to exercise their voting rights if they meet the established qualifications and requirements. Our aim is to ensure that the reforms we undertake genuinely reflect the will of the people, adhere to the international best practices, and strengthen our electoral system for the benefit of generations to come. We must never lose sight of the fact that voting in Dominica is a fundamental right enshrined in our Constitution and recognized by all international organizations and a cornerstone of any democracy. People died to vote. We moved from a system in Dominica where you could only vote if you own estates. In recent history, contemporary history. And we should never be seen to be putting stumbling blocks before people to exercise that fundamental right in Dominica. We must make it easy for people to vote, of course, with certain parameters, but we must not make it difficult for people to vote in Dominica. That's wrong. It's fundamentally wrong. It's historically wrong. All facets of it is wrong, and we should not support this. And so, let me be clear. This government is resolute in its dedication to seeing these reforms through to their completion. I am personally, as I said, committed to ensuring this process reaches its successful conclusion, and that we are not, again, sidelined by any unnecessary delays. So let us stop the threats of violence in Dominica. Let us condemn anybody who is promoting violence. This is wrong. We must learn to agree and disagree. This is about consensus building. We will not have everything in there that we want. We will not get everything that we don't want. It is about making compromise. You cannot want everything and the other person doesn't have anything. No. No. It is not right what we're seeking to do. And so I come to an issue, for example, of confirmation of registration. While the current register has served as a foundation of our electoral process, it is evident that modernization is necessary to ensure it accurately reflects our voting population. So there's no dispute there. We all agree we have to find a mechanism of bringing the voters list to what truly reflects the voting population in Dominica. We agree to that. The Registration of Electors Bill introduces provisions for mandatory voter confirmation during a specified period of 12 months, and which can be extended by 3 months, requiring valid documentation for verification. Dominican citizens residing overseas who wish to be reconfirmed on the electors list will be required to do so in person here in Dominica. And I must point out that this represents a shift from this government's initial position on the matter, which proposed facilitating Dominicans living abroad to confirm their registration in select cities. And in the Sir Dennis Byron recommendations, he said that the Commission should go out and get Dominicans confirmed where they live. Where they live. So when we're saying that we set aside what Sir Dennis Byron report says, these are some of the things we're talking about. And instead, we are adjusting our approach in an effort to advance in the process. I can tell you, all of you on the head table every year in Dominica, I was opposed and still opposed to that position from a fundamental standpoint, from a philosophical standpoint, from a historical standpoint, from an ideological standpoint, from a standpoint of justice. I'm opposed to that provision. But in the spirit of giving and taking, I have not imposed my personal view on this, but rather going ahead with what we believe will advance the process. That's what we're about. That's what it's about. Because we are following the St. Kitts model. St. Kitts, during the reform, supported by the Commonwealth Secretariat, the Commission went to major cities where there are large concentration of Nivishans and Kivishans. Come on, let's move the process forward. That is what we're trying to do. And so, I'm aware that some of you hold different views on the matter of Dominicans living abroad being allowed to undergo a confirmation process and remain on the voters list. The government is determined that no citizen will be disenfranchised or denied the opportunity to participate in the electoral process of Dominica. We will safeguard the rights of all our citizens because voting is a fundamental right of citizenship. As a matter of fact, for there to be a change in respect of Dominicans residing abroad and who have been legally registered to vote in Dominica to be changed, we have to go to a referendum. The majority of Dominica by a vote must tell the government, we do not want Dominicans living overseas to vote, and then we will go ahead with it. But it's not going to happen by this government. This government is not going to go to Parliament and pass laws to disenfranchise Dominicans living overseas to vote. It is wrong. It is wrong, and we know those who are promoting it, they know that it is wrong. Many Dominicans living abroad maintain deep connections to their homeland, contributing significantly to our economy through remittances, investments, and advocacy. To deny them the ability to remain on the voters list would undermine their constitutional rights and diminish their role in shaping our country's future. So I want to assure every Dominican, no matter where they reside or their political affiliation, that they are an integral part of our country and our country's development. Many nations permit the diaspora to participate in elections, understanding the immense value of their contributions. I see no compelling reason for Dominica, a small island state that needs the involvement and support of all of its citizens, to depart from this widely accepted practice. And the same people who are opposed to Dominicans coming back to vote are the same people who are proposing a virtual constituency. Or have somebody from the diaspora representing the parliament. Come on. Let's be serious. Let's be serious, folks. This is serious business, as some people would say. The issue of introduction of voter identification cards. We will issue voter identification cards containing key identifying information, including a photograph and an advanced security features, such as a unique identification number. Here again, this reflects our willingness to compromise. Personally, I have always favored the implementation of a national ID card over a voter ID card, as it offers broader utility and is more cost effective. And I will say to the panelists, I can tell you within my own party is at odds with me because we compromise on this. But leadership is important. And that is what we advance in. Because we have to compromise. That's why I told the party. Not everything you have to fight. There are things that you have to compromise on in life to ensure that there's social justice. And we compromise on this. But this is a waste of money to go for voter ID card. Seriously speaking, what is the argument between a voter ID card and an election card? Then you could have used the national ID card for many, many things. Now you're going to use a card now just for voting every 5 years. Most of us are going to lose it because there's no money in it. It's not a bank card, it's not a bank book. So you're going to lose it, and we're going to have to pay. We're going to pay to replace it every time we lose it. When you could have had the national ID card, as we're saying, you travel within the OECS with it, because you can travel for identification card in the OECS. You can use it as an additional form of identification in Dominica and elsewhere. Greater use of money. But there are people who are opposed to the national ID card because they wanted to stop the process of electoral reform moving forward.
Minority,
You understand? A minority group, again in the spirit of compromise, we give up on this, knowing that it is not the right way to go. It is the wrong way to go financially, and from a sensible standpoint, it's the wrong way to go. But in the spirit of compromise, we decided to go with that. And so, one point of contention is the requirement for fingerprints. Let me just ask, why is this absolutely necessary for something as straightforward as a voter ID card? Nobody is saying that for us to get a passport, we need a fingerprint, and a passport is the highest identification document you have in the country. We get our passports, we go click with your picture and we have it. The passport has a passport number. The passport has security features. And we travel. We travel the world with it. And we're able to distinguish Pastor Randy Rodney from Roosevelt Scourge with the passport. If you put you and my passport next to each other, you must say it's you, my brother. You understand what I'm saying? I taller than you. You understand what I'm saying? I'm more handsome than you. Come on. You understand what I'm saying? So you telling me, I mean, okay, the Bar Association said they agree that, because I was going to make a reference to the Bar Association. But you're going to come on, why do we need to get? And the madam from the Bar Association, Mrs. Dede, knows that the only time in our country that you are required to give a fingerprint is after the charge for criminal matter. And so we want to link voting, which is the right, to criminality. Come on! The only time you are required in Dominica to give a fingerprint is after you have been charged criminally. The police can tell you, my brother, give me a fingerprint. And I hear people say, well, when you travel, they ask for a fingerprint. When you travel and you go to somebody's country, it's a privilege to enter the person's country. You choose to take advantage of the privilege. If you don't want to give a fingerprint to go back to your country, it's not a right. So we can't equate that requirement. So you go to school, no fingerprint. You apply for a passport, no fingerprint. You apply for a social security card, which is an important document, no fingerprint. So why do we want to hold back the process by insisting that we must have fingerprinting for voter ID card? Come on, my brothers and sisters. This is a small country. The truth is, we really don't even need voter ID card to vote in Dominica. Everybody knows each other. To come and talk about Haitians there and a Haitian might vote for Dominican. Anybody, if you have in Trafalgar Square and vote, you must know Haitian. You can see them and say, man, Haitian. Come on. So let us not trivialize a very fundamental point on this issue. So we've moved away from this. And so we believe that those who are insisting on this are looking for trivial matters. Trivial matters to cause their supporters to be misinformed and to act on this misinformation in a negative way. And we must not encourage that. The issue of legislative reforms to strengthen the Electoral Commission. We're not opposed if you only put 10 people on the commission. It's okay. It's okay. If that's a discussion, we can have it. There's nothing fundamentally wrong with this thing. You want a broader representation, that's fine, but it can't be for that. It has to be under constitutional reform. It cannot be in those bills. It cannot be in those bills. We believe, people might have different views, we believe that it has to be a constitutional reform issue. And you talk about you must have a woman in there, that's how Canada going to do. We want to trivialize the thing. No. If you say it must be the best qualifications, then if it's 10 women qualified, then put 10 women. If it's 2 men and 8 women, then have 2 men and 8 women. Let us be so, but it can't be based on gender. No. We have prescribed qualifications. And so let us not trivialize this issue. So we have no issue with that. Really. And what we have tried to do is, our goal is to enhance the autonomy and the capacity of the Electoral Commission, equipping it with the tools and independence necessary to oversee free and fair elections in Dominica. At present, the Electoral Commission supervises the registration process, but operates with limited enforcement powers. If we say we examine the bills, we should point out the additional authority that we're given to the Commission to cause it now to have an enforcement authority, a departure from what exists today. So let us be fair to us. Let us be fair to the government, man. Come on, man. Don't do us that, man. No, it's not fair. If we have a conversation, let's be honest. Let's be transparent. Do not give people the impression that the government has set aside a mass what Sir Dennis Barron has recommended. No, that's not true. And so the proposed legislation will expand the Commission's authority to issue directives, engage in voter education, integrate technology for more efficient management, and, crucially, execute the confirmation and verification process. The law is providing them that authority. Passing the bill in Parliament will empower the Electoral Commission to advance the reform process, bringing much needed resolution to the critical matter. And on the issue of increasing the age from 55 years to 60 years or even 65 years, we're not opposed to that. I think it might have been an oversight on our part regards to increasing the age of retirement, and that will be effected in the Parliament's debate on the bills and so forth. So we have no objection to that. We did a similar matter for the Director of Audit, but because you require an amendment to the law, we had some delay in going to the Parliament and waited for the process of this electoral reform. So we have no objection to this recommendation of increasing the age of retirement for the Chief Elections Officer. So that's no problem. Now, the issue of campaign financing. And we believe that this is being used as a red herring. While there is nothing inherently wrong with introducing legislation on campaign financing, it is not our primary focus at this time. It is a notional, an aspirational objective. We support it in principle. But anybody who would have read what Sir Dennis Barron suggested to us would recognize that what he has suggested is incomplete. He has taken what from Jamaica, he has transported it from Jamaica, essentially a mass. But as what says what's happening in Jamaica in regards to its enforcement and its implementation. We cannot treat this thing as a theoretical academic exercise. We can't pass a law knowing that we will have difficulty in overseeing the law, implementing it. What's the cost of running it? What's the cost of overseeing this? How is it going to impact small political parties? How is it going to impact independent candidates? And when people and I believe there are people who are pushing this because they believe in their minds that the reason why the Labour Party is winning because Labour has plenty of money. But Labour had no money in 2000. We won. Labour had less money in 2005. We won. Labour had less money in 2009. We won, and we won bigger. Kamala Harris spent $1.5 billion in 100 days. Mr. Trump spent $463 for the entire campaign. And who is the president of America today? Mr. Trump. Mr. Trump, money will not buy you love. Money will not make you win an election. There are things that you have to do as a politician to win an election. Me and Watley won 30 seats in opposition. The Prime Minister lost his seat. The Antigua and Barbuda Labour Party had more money than UPP and Baldwin Spencer in 2004. They lost. Bosso, really big. Thank you, Bosso. I see shake his head there. My partner had to know my partner. All three of them together, you know, IFM. You know, we used to sit in the vehicle and say, who's the candidate for Freedom Party back in the days? I couldn't vote, but I had a role to play. Yeah, I was a big Freedom man, you know, back in the days. So, our view, my friends, is that this is not a matter for now. And I agree with the Business Forum. In their discussions with the President, which the Attorney General reported to me he was present, where he agreed that this is a medium-term issue. This should not hold back the process. This thing is highly technical, which requires more consideration. So we're not opposed to it. What we're saying that we're not ready for it at this time. And this is why this was discussed at CARICOM level. Because the only country that has any legislation on recent vintage is Jamaica. Barbados has something that really does not, is not there. So no other CARICOM country has it. And we felt within CARICOM that we need to have a regional approach to discussing this matter. This is how it was raised because at the time they were speaking about the report from electoral observation and endowment. And that matter was raised. And we all know that. And so there are things to tell a man, but when you go and you get a bus driver takes you from Rosal North to Rosal Central, you pay 150, you have to give a receipt. You have to give a receipt. Which bus driver have receipt booking normally? Which bus driver have receipt booking normally? So you tell me you're going to arrest a man because he didn't give a receipt to carry people from one meeting to another? Let's understand this thing. You go and you meet some guys by the shop, election time, and you buy some drinks. It comes to $100. You have to ask the shopkeeper, madam, my receipt please. In a village shop. And you have to write down everybody who you give a drink. Everybody who you give a drink, you have to write them down. And the shopkeeper must give you a thing. So you stop I stopped now in Canefield now, by the lady who asked me the best barbecue down there, this David lady. Rona and the David lady down there, by Old Mill. And I stopped there, I said, my parents on the block, I buy some chicken for them. Where in that barbecue grill are they going to have a receipt to give you? Come on, man. Let us take our time. Let us move with the identification card. Let us move with strengthening the authority and expanding the authority of the Commission. Let us move to addressing the issue of confirmation. Let us address the bloated voters list, whatever you call. Let us give each man a voter ID card. And next time we can talk about campaign financing. That's what we're talking about, ladies and gentlemen, friends, Dominicans. That's what we're talking about. And so, I would also like to highlight the concerns about election offenses that are addressed in the House of Assembly Act 2024. Part 6, Section 60 covers bribery, while Section 61 addresses cheating. These sections outline the offenses, whether committed by voters or officials, and the recommended penalties. If there are specific concerns regarding the wording or the proposed penalties, this should be raised clearly and directly. At this stage, we cannot afford to deal in vague generalizations. So that is in there. And for anybody to get the impression that we have not put any offenses and penalties in the legislation is not being truthful. If you think the wording should be different, then tell us that. Or tell the nation so. but we'll tell the nation that we will address that in the bill. Another issue which has been raised in the suggestion that the legislation should require all media, including private radio stations and outlets, to provide coverage of political activities during the election campaign. This idea runs counter to the very principles we aim to uphold. Such a measure would undermine the democracy we are striving to strengthen. You're telling me that you want me to go to Parliament to pass a legislation that the little Catholic radio station that the bishop has, that he must carry political meetings while the church be praying the rosary? That's what you're going to do there. And my little church, I give a little support from time to time. Voice of Life, doing a good job, passing the word of God. Yes, I'll give you a little church contribution, I'll always do. You tell me that they have to stop giving souls to heaven and go and carry a political meeting in Lago? That's what they're saying. That is what they're proposing. You're like a radio station where if you get a little collection, you don't have to, you must carry my meeting, my brother, you must. The bishop must carry our political meetings. And I'm saying we should not put those radio stations under this law because it is not right, it is not fair to them that the parliament can go and force itself on this institution. This is a democracy. This is a free market economy. It's a free market economy. And when you start with this, what are you going to suggest to the government to go and do at people's privacy? A lawyer must represent a man who will be before the court. If you choose to do a public service, you see a man struggling before the magistrate or the judge, you step forward. But you don't must represent anybody. So that's the next step then. You must represent a politician who gets it for free. Where do you stop? Former superintendent of police. Where do you stop? I was wondering, we represent today because you CSR and so on. When you say it's the other committee you recommending and so on. All fairness, you're comprehensive. You're comprehensive. I don't have to say what you're comprehensive. That's good. That's the spirit. That we agree to disagree and so on, respectfully and so on. And so we have to be careful with this thing. And so, while the opposition and opposition radio, opposition groups fail to say is that this will cover all radio stations, all media outlets. We agree that the state-owned entities shall cover all political parties, including independent candidates, and give them opportunity to spread the word, to say who they are, what they offer in the country, and to provide that time equal to what the party in government would receive. We agree to that. And I think that's fair. Let's move on to the next point. That's it, that's what we're talking about. And so, my dear friends, I don't want to be long. I think I was much shorter than all of you who spoke there. You guys were very long. You guys were very long. And you guys represent half of what I represent. All of you on the table there. You're fighting the group, you're people, the people. I can speak about the people. We the people, I can speak about people. Come on. So, we must not let partisanship, or misinformation derail the progress we are making. This is a time for unity, a moment to demonstrate our collective commitment to the process that serves the interests of all Dominicans, regardless of our political affiliation. We should be mindful that electoral reform requires collaboration, understanding, and above all, compromise. And I've articulated throughout the idea a number of other things I could have highlighted. where this government has compromised its position to allow the process to go forward. In addressing this issue of electoral reform, we have to acknowledge that no single side will achieve all of its desired outcomes or interests. Instead, everyone involved will need to make compromises so that the final decision is fair and it puts the common good above individual preferences. As Prime Minister, I pledge that this government will continue to act in the best interest of every Dominican. We'll continue to engage in open dialogue, welcome constructive criticism, and ensure that our actions on electoral reform are guided by inclusivity, integrity, and a steadfast commitment to strengthening our democracy. Writing to international organizations and misleading those international organizations by mistruths and untruths is not in the best national interest. It is wrong, and it is all intended to besmirch Dominica. This entity wrote to the International Human Rights Council, Inter-American Human Rights Council, citing a whole set of untruths. But we shall always defend this country. And we responded to the correspondence from this organization in a very strong and strident manner, because we believe that we have a duty and obligation to protect our country's integrity and our good name. And so I am happy to be here, Mr. Severin and Mr. Darrell Bob your grouping, Business Forum. I think it's commendable. This is why we came to support. We continue to be engaged. You could speak to parliamentarians, share your views with them individually or in small groups, because ultimately it's they who are going to pass the legislation. As per the Constitution of Dominica, I believe Section 42 AG, or the Constitution, gives the parliamentary authority to pass the laws. It's not me who passes the Constitution. It has always been there. Always 41. So I thank you again for inviting me. I said we have taken note. We'll go back and look at those some suggestions you made. If there are some things that we believe that could be included in this, no doubt, we'll give consideration to that. I give you that word. But there are some fundamental issues. There are some fundamental points that I do not believe that we will compromise upon, because we have to protect we have to ensure that justice is always there. And our forebears and human beings across the world fought and died to get the right to vote. And we must not allow this to appear to be playing dominoes on a Friday afternoon. It's not. It's serious business. And this is why you would recognize that no time in our history there has been such consultation on any matter in the country, in our entire pre- and post-political independence. Not even during independence or move towards independence, we had such wide consultation on what should have been in the Constitution of Dominica. And you will attest to this, my friend, the former high-ranking police officer. What I'm saying, what Kerry said is really true. Really true. You're comprehensive, because you know why? Because we have treated in the government this process akin to making constitutional amendments. But in this process, my brothers, you'll always not get all what you want. I am not getting all what I wanted. My party is not getting all what I wanted. And we have 19 people in parliament. Can you imagine that? There is nowhere in the world where you could go to a parliament and not get all what you want. Not in America. But we have to recognize, as President Trump is President Trump is acting as he's doing now. We can disagree, Americans can disagree or not, because he won the elections. And the Republicans control the Senate, and they control the House of Representatives. So he can do what he wants, insofar as it is within the confines of the Constitution. But he has the authority, and so does Parliament. And we must not give school children the impression that we go to Parliament is wrong, because Parliament is where laws are passed, not in consultation. Consultation is part of the process. Ultimately, it's a Parliament that passes the laws. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. I must say that, Mr. PM, I must say that you remind me of my days when I used to be in active politics and campaigning for the Dominican Labour Party. Because, you know, and as I look around the room, I can see we are the only true Labourites that in the room right now are myself and Cecil Joseph. Right? Clarence is there. Clarence was never on the front line. Who is that? Oh, no, me, Erickson, yeah. So there are, you know, there is a handful of true Labourites in this place. So that's why I tell you, if you see, you remind me of my days when I was an advocate up to 2000 when we led this campaign. In fact, when I contested the elections in 1990, in the peak of UWP and the Dominican Labour Party, I knew I was going to lose my deposit. All right. So, if I had assumed the role of the Speaker of the House, I would have told you on a number of times, Mr. Prime Minister, that you are imputing improper motives, but we let you escape with this one. Because the whole thing about it is that you will realize that the panelists that we presented all kept to the script of electoral reform. So Daryl Bob gave an overview of what the Dominican Business Forum presented in 2023, after Dennis Byron stayed. Pastor Rodney stuck to the script. Nicholas George stuck to what the ERC has come up with as far as the latest recommendations are concerned. And I think the lawyers, the Dominican Bar Association did a brilliant job in bringing to focus all the sections of the law, of the bills that they think need some type of discussion. So the last part of your presentation will take you, hope that we'll leave up to you that we will have some type of discussion and arrive at some type of consensus to agree to disagree on some things. We are here again for many reasons, because I said at the beginning there was a big silence and we did not see some discussions taking place on the window that we had since you took the legislation and had the first reading in Parliament. I'll make another reference about laws and things. In fact, only this morning I had a discussion with a client. He was talking about a construction contract. And I have to tell him, hey, is either you have a contract or you don't have a contract. There is no piece of contract. You either have a contract or you do not have a contract. And we could almost give the same analogy in terms of either we have an electoral bill that meets some of the basic requirements of the country and answers some of the vexing issues, or we don't have an electoral bill. Because one of the things that we are very much concerned about as a business forum is that this electoral reform campaign and demand and protestations will continue if some of the basic requirements to ease the... No, but this is what I'm saying. So what I'm saying is, this is where you have to sit and agree and have some type of discussion. So we do recognize that we as the Dominica Business Forum is like a drop of, it's like a needle in a haystack, but we are very gentlemen, Mr. Prime Minister, with all due respect, Mr. Prime Minister, you came, we asked. What did I say that is wrong? What did I say that is wrong? Oh, no, but Mr. Prime Minister, hey, can I have something there? Let me put some things in perspective. We sent an invitation to the government. We sent an invitation to the government to participate in this. Will you allow me to? Can we have so far I think we have gone very well. All right, let's get this thing in order. Let me only make a clarification. Let me make a clarification so that I have to put everything in perspective. We sent an invitation to the government accepted on Monday. We sent a draft program to the government, and we proposed that the government would speak after the presenters. Yeah? Then we got a call that the government wanted to make an opening presentation at the beginning and the closing presentation at the end. We changed the agenda and we accepted this proposal. Then the government sent another one and said, we will speak at the end. We changed the program again to facilitate, to accommodate the government. The whole thing about it is that we came here tonight to discuss the electoral reform bills, and we were very careful in telling all the presenters to stick to the script of the electoral bills and what we have been doing with the electoral reform process. So we listened to the Prime Minister and we heard all what was said. So the Prime Minister is saying right now that after having spoken, we should not, and at the beginning of the Prime Minister's intervention, in fact, he said he will speak, the Attorney General will make a contribution, Minister Blackmore will make a contribution, and Minister Vince Henderson will make a contribution. No? What did you say? Please clarify.
I'm not sure why Sir is doing this, man. No, please. No, you invited us to come. All right? I also to travel. We indicated to you that a government representative will come. I canceled my trip. I came here, my brother. The point is, we came here to listen, because we have presented to the Parliament what we believe to be what Parliament should consider. There it is. Once it is in light, this blue color, it means that you go to Parliament. And so we listen to you. What I have done is that I have responded to some broad fundamental points that are the main issues of concern. When I read all of the suggestions that people have made, it speaks to those core issues. I said that the Attorney General will be given opportunity to respond to specific issues. So he will go to section this and section that and clause this and clause that. It's not for me to do. So and to go on about government has to change this and going to change that and so on. Why you want to do that for? I'm here. We're here. We spoke. We listened. I never interrupted anybody here. We listened to all of what they're saying. Respectfully. We hear him in peace and love. So why you guys come in or you play? No, but why you have to go for this thing? You haven't called the agent to speak, and you give the person an agent refuse to speak. I did not say that Dr. Henderson and Honorable Blackman would speak. I said they may support the AG. May. But you haven't called the AG. You behaving as if you call the AG refuse to speak. Call the man, you give a long speech. Call the man to speak, you don't want to speak.
Okay, this is the objection that the Prime Minister takes, that after his deliberations that no comment should be made and we should go straight into the AG. We have no problem with that. Except to say that there are a number of things that the Prime Minister mentioned in his deliberations that were away from what we were doing and the presentations that we made, and that's what I'd like to put on record. So at this stage, I would like to call on the Attorney General. I would like to call on the Attorney General to make his presentation. All right? Mr. Levi Peter.
Good evening. I must say that to speak in this particular circumstance is not really what I would have hoped for, and also I think that the Prime Minister. Sorry if you're not hearing me, then that's a function of the technology, mic. I don't think I should be shouting any longer than I am. So. Technician, can you turn the volume up if it needs to be turned up? Yes, the Prime Minister has addressed the meeting, and I think that he captured and hit all of the salient points. I don't really think it requires me to say very much more. In fact, it doesn't really require me to say anything more. But I've been asked to go ahead, so I will say one or two words. I will literally be one or two words. Unless I get warm and then start running away. So I think in terms of trying to identify specific issues, in particular issues arising from the evening's conversation, if I can put it that way. One of the things that I found interesting is that we listened to a number of speakers, and people, most of them were from various groups that were of the view that the draft bills, or the bills I should say, are deficient in some way or another. As far as I was able to ascertain, the deficiencies that have been identified are not within the bills themselves. At least I don't recall anybody pointing out anything actually in the bills that they have a problem with. What I understood, people were saying that there are things that are not in the bills that they would have liked to have seen in the bills. In most instances, perhaps with the exception of Mrs. Knight DJ, those things were not pointed out. The general statements were not pointed out. One or two were, and I will probably touch on a couple of them. But one of the things that I think is critical is the reference was made to the Constitution. Indeed, reference was made to the preamble to the Constitution. But reference wasn't made to the Constitution in terms of supporting the various positions that people were putting forward and supporting the so-called omissions that people felt should be in the bills. And a critical one is, which was referred to by one of the speakers. I try to avoid speaking or identifying particular speakers, but one of the speakers referred to the issue of residence. And it's something that I noticed is frequently spoken about, and we're now in a new dispensation where, as far as I'm concerned, as I understand the Constitution, and as I understand the electoral laws of Dominica, we're now in a dispensation where people are seeking, without legislative foundation, to change the parameters of what is required for a person to be qualified to vote. I think Section 33 was mentioned en passant, Section 33 of the Constitution, and indeed Section 33 was mentioned insofar as Section 33(2)A is concerned. And that Section 33(2)A was quoted, I think, to support a particular position, to fortify or attempt to fortify the position that residence is a requirement to vote. Well, I've said it before and I say it again, residence is not a requirement to vote. The Constitution provides in Section 33(2)A that residence is a requirement in order to get registered. It then moves to Section 33(2)B, which I shall read. Section 33(2)B says, every person who is registered as aforesaid in any constituency shall, unless he is disqualified by Parliament from voting in that constituency in any election of representatives, be entitled to vote in accordance with the provisions of any law in that behalf, and no other person may so vote. It makes no reference there to residence. It simply provides and requires that a person who is registered. Now, what is the qualification to be registered? The qualification is that you have to be at least 18 years of age, you have to be a citizen of Dominica or a Commonwealth citizen, and you have to have resided in the constituency or the polling district that you are seeking to be registered for a period of at least 3 months. So, once registered, according to 2A, you are registered, and thereafter, you are unregistered and you are entitled to vote. That position is actually bolstered by other provisions of the law, which provide that the register of electors at any time when an election is called is conclusive. The names on it. It's conclusive that they are entitled to vote. Now, that clearly shows that it is registration, and once registered, you are entitled to vote. The other factor that I would suggest dispels the argument about residence is that the existing law and the bills that are now before Parliament continue to maintain the situation. That if you transfer, so if you move from one polling district, one constituency to another, you are still entitled and able to vote. That is provided for expressly in the legislation. So it is quite clear that the framers of the Constitution and the framers of the electoral legislation intended that anyone, once registered, properly registered, is entitled to vote. So I think it's important that we understand that, because this new term is popping up and becoming very frequent, the issue of ordinary residence. And if you look at ordinary residence, you will see that ordinary residence, it occurs in relation to situations where a person should be removed from the register. But it also occurs in terms of the definition outlined in the regulation, registration of electors regulations. I think it's at regulation 6, sets out, it talks about ordinary residents, and if you are living here, if you're sleeping there, and those things. But if you look at it, you'll see that it's referring again to registration. Registration. So there is a distinction between registration and voting. The other thing that I think is important, as I'm trying to skip through a few things, is the issue of confirmation. Now, confirmation is a new introduction to our electoral system and our electoral processes. It was first broached, shall I say, in 2017 in the draft that went to Parliament and was not proceeded with. And confirmation is essentially a process which is intended and designed to cleanse the list. One of the things that many say they want. And it works this way. A person is registered and on the list. He or she wishes to continue to remain on that list and to be able to vote if they choose to whenever an election is called. The Electoral Commission has responsibilities that are given to it by the legislation. And in the current draft, or the current bill before the House, in particular the registration of elections bill, it decrees that once that bill is passed, within 30 days of that bill being passed, the Electoral Commission, not the government, not the opposition, not the Dominican Labour Party, not whoever, not Dominica Business Forum, the Electoral Commission, within 30 days of that bill being elected, is required by what would then be an act to declare a confirmation period. That confirmation period can be no longer than 12 months. It is possible for that 12 months to be extended by 3 months, at the maximum to 15 months. And thereafter, so during that period of 12, or if it's extended that period of 15 months, everybody, me, the Prime Minister, all of the ministers here, everybody else here who is, if you are actually on the list, you have to confirm. That means you have to present yourself in accordance with the directions of the Electoral Commission and the Electoral Office at an appropriate venue and indicate that you wish to be confirmed on the list or the register. You will of course be told what you need to provide, and obviously you have to establish that you are John Brown or Jill James or whatever your name may be, Levi Peter. You have to establish that you are that person to the satisfaction of the folks at the electoral office or wherever it is that you go to confirm. And the Commission, again, has authority to designate various centres. And that really is the process that will enable the list to be cleansed. Because at that point, if you are on that register and you do not present yourself as the bill provides, you will be removed. That therefore means that we might get to the number, Pastor Randy, that you referred to. I think you say your engagement with the folks you were engaged with, you all concluded that it's probably 45, 50,000 or something that should be on the list. Well, it may be, we shall see. Whatever the number is, we will see what it is. But the important thing is that that will be a list that from whatever date the electoral office cuts off, that will be establishing that everybody on that list will be people who are entitled to be there. Of course, there will be continuous registration of new people who turn 18 and so on. Other people who may be older than 18 but were not registered but are qualified, they of course will be able to get registered. And so it is not really as complicated and complex as some may think. Now the question is, if you don't register and therefore you're not on the list, as somebody asked me earlier, and I think it's important probably to say that for the benefit of the public, what happens? Well, obviously, if you don't comply with the law, the law tells you what happens. You'll be removed from the list, and therefore you will not be able to vote. At least not until you re-register. And of course, to re-register, it will mean you will need to have been in a polling district, the polling district you want to register for, living there for at least 3 months. So those of us who are in Dominica, I suppose it might be quite easy for us if we didn't. If we decided at any point to go and register, once we could prove we had been at that address for 3 months, we'd really be able to re-register. It would be obviously more tricky to somebody who is living out of Dominica. And that leads me to the point that, of course, the government has said very clearly that confirmation, all confirmation will be in Dominica. That was a point of argument. It's a concession by the government in terms of trying to enable the whole process to go forward, to say, okay, well, people are complaining about whatever fanciful possibilities there are, or gerrymandering or whatever it is. So all of it will be done here. Anybody who wants to be registered or remain registered will have to come to Dominica. But interestingly, as I recall from the previous set of discussions around confirmation back in 2017, 2018, 2019, it was being said that it would be discriminatory for the government to provide services to facilitate people overseas at the venues that we have high concentrations of Dominicans and using the various diplomatic missions and so on. People were saying it would be discriminatory. If you have, people in Washington could easily go to the High Commission, to the embassy, whatever. If you're in the Arctic, it might be more challenging, and therefore it would be discriminatory. But I guess right now it's a level playing field. Everybody will have to come back from wherever they are to confirm. And I suppose it's interesting that there's now also a suggestion that somehow that might be a problem for some people. I think the reality is we're dealing with law. If there are challenges that come up, then people bring their challenges and we'll go to court and we'll see what happens at court. But I don't think that we can allow ourselves to get bogged down because there may be some real or perceived possible challenge or something. The reality is there's no perfect law, there's no perfect situation, and we have to do the best that we can in the circumstance. And I think that I can say with some confidence that we have sought in this process to do that. Of course, we're not perfect, so we may, and we have got certain things wrong, some of which have come to our attention. Some probably have not yet come to our attention, but that's what the process is about. Legislation is something that is constantly being amended. So again, if I move to something that was said by the first speaker this evening, and it's been said a number of times since we've got on this second limb, it is to do with a claim that there is nothing in Sir Dennis's bills as regards multiple voting. That's not true. Or maybe in different language it's not correct. There is in the bills, and I had actually left my bills because I really didn't come here intending to stay. They're on the desk, I left them over there. But in the bills, I think I remember this one, I think it's Registration of Electors Bill, and Section 6, I think subsection 3 or subsection 4, makes it an offense to register in more than one district or to register to register in more than one polling district and to register in more than one district, constituency. Also in the, and I think also Section 30 something also. Section 38 also makes that even more explicit. The House of Assembly Elections Bill also addresses that. Clause 28 of the House of Assembly Elections Bill makes it an offense to vote more than once or in more than one polling district. And it provides a penalty. So it's not correct, something that's been said quite a lot, that Sir Dennis's bill doesn't provide for that. And in fact, the existing electoral legislation, both the House of Assembly and the Register of Electors Act, provides that that is an offense. So that continues to be an offense. I mean, one of the things people, I don't know to what extent people have actually read both Sir Dennis's the two phases of his report and indeed the bills, because Sir Dennis says in his report that he essentially adopted the existing legislation Obviously, it was modernized, and if you look, if you go for it, you'll see it's pretty much the same. Language has been modernized, and some of the old language is not used, using more modern terms. And then obviously there are a couple of areas that he's introduced some new concepts. Campaign finance, access to media, the confirmation process, which was obviously 27 draft, and a few 2017 draft, and a few other things. But essentially, the bills that we had before, what we came with, the amendments in 2017, there's nothing in the amendments that we came with in 2017 that is not in these bills now. Well, I should qualify that. There's nothing except, for example, one thing that was mentioned by Mr. Knight, DJ, which is in relation to the issue of the absence of an order, or the reference to the requirement for an order. The bill as now drafted, the relevant provision, as I don't have it, it's on there now, but the relevant provision is now only, it doesn't have, there's no provision for biometrics, because the government's position, as has been articulated here tonight by the Prime Minister, has articulated before, is that there is no requirement, realistically, no need for us to have biometrics. That if we have an identification card that has a recent photograph, it has a unique identifier, it has your voter number, it has your address, it has your occupation, it has your full name, it has your date of birth. We don't need it. We're in a small community, everybody knows everybody. And if you don't know anybody when I show up with my card, you look at it, you should be able to see. So in the absence of that sensitive, intimate type of information that you would have in biometrics, it is not considered that the information that I just told you is sufficiently sensitive that if the police should require the name of John Brown or the date of birth of John Brown or Levi Visa, that really requires a court order. That may be, people may have different views, that may be something that could be discussed further, but I think that really is why there is the reference to the order is no longer there. Also, the issue of bribery and treating, I think I have to deal with that, because that is law. I mean, it is very interesting. My colleague and good friend from the bar, Mrs. Naidiji, referred to the appearance of impropriety, I think she said, in relation to transportation. But we deal with law, we're not dealing with appearance and whether impropriety or otherwise. We deal with law. And the question is, what is the law? The law is very clear. The law is bribery is defined and has been the same definition for maybe pretty much probably time immemorial. Certainly if you go back in the authorities, and the cases, the election cases go back to the 1800s. And if you look at them, Cooper, Slade and so on, those cases are very clear what is bribery. So is Halsbury's. And strangely, the people who are articulating and arguing and pushing and contending that the definition of bribery needs to be changed, and indeed, so Dennis dealt with that in his phase 2 report, where he said he saw no need for the definition of bribery to be changed. I depart slightly from Sir Dennis, well, maybe not slightly, quite significantly actually, because Sir Dennis, in my view, in that report, I think it's probably at page 9, the bottom of page 9 going to the top of page 10, where he deals with the issue of bribery, and he was urged and invited to introduce a new definition. And he says he doesn't see the need for it. But where I depart from him is that he quotes Halsbury's paragraph 770, but he doesn't quote it in its entirety, just like most of the people who are arguing for a change of definition. He quotes the latter part of it, and like them, he doesn't have the conjunction but. The actual definition, what it's saying in Halsbury's 770, is that the unconditional payment, or the unconditional payment to a person, is not bribery. So, if I facilitate you to get from point A to point B, at election day to exercise your franchise to vote, and I'm not in any way seeking to influence you, that is not bribery. But that's where it goes on to the bill that people quote. It says, but if I am seeking to influence you, I'm obviously paraphrasing what I have in front of me, then that's a different matter. it would be bribery. So we have to be clear, it is there, and that's why in the existing act and in the bill, which is now before the House, it makes it very clear that you have to have a mental, in law, what lawyers would know is called mens rea. You have to have the intent. I mean, if I listen to people, it seems that what is being sought is really to make it, to make this an offense of strict liability. So once you do the act, so once you move me from point A to point B, it's an offense, and that is not what the law is. The other thing in relation to that obviously applies into the issue of treating. Again, there are many cases, and this issue has been dealt with. You know, in cases dealing with people who take people to what in the UK and Ireland are known as pubs to give them a drink, because some people, you know, okay, some people you can probably buy them a drink. A lot of people will need something more. But the point is, if I give somebody a drink and I'm not giving the person the drink to influence them corruptly, then that's not bribery. If I'm seeking to corrupt them, then of course, you know, if my intention is to influence them, that's a different matter. So we have to be clear about that, and I think that that clarity is necessary so that we don't end up with some of the challenges. And finally on this, I will say this because the legislation of all of our sister nations is available online. I've looked at it, and I've looked at legislation dealing with bribery and treating, and in all the jurisdictions in this region, in all of the CARICOM jurisdictions, their legislation is essentially the same as ours, the language. All of it is the same, that requirement. The requirement of the intention to corrupt a person. So I think for us to want to depart from that and create some new territory because we may have some particular instance or event that we're concerned about, I think we have to be very cautious about that. You can't make laws for particular just because you have one situation that perhaps we don't like. The issue also was mentioned and has been mentioned previously about the AG appointing a special prosecutor. Well, I have been AG for a while. I've never, I suppose maybe it's referring to, instructing counsel, perhaps counsel from outside the chambers. I'm not sure how or why we would think it's a good idea to seek to hobble the AG for a situation that has existed from whenever you have AGs, and our system comes along from the UK. We've had it since independence in '78. In fact, we had AGs before that. So at least since '78, we've had AGs. We've never felt the need to try to hobble them and say that they can't do this, they can't do that. I'm not sure why we now think that that's necessary. Even more egregious is this thing about the Director of Public Prosecutions not being able to take over election cases, not other cases, election cases. That specific category. You're going to strip the Solicitor General, the Director of Public Prosecution of that constitutional role. Because again, it's an issue that is a constitutional rule. So for you to interfere with that, you're going to have to amend the Constitution. But quite apart from whatever challenges there are with amending the Constitution, why would you want to do that? Because you had a case in which the people who claimed that they were bringing private criminal prosecution against members of the Dominican Labour Party, they brought their case. They filed it. It was recorded. It went through the process. One passed away, sadly, a former colleague of mine. One decided that the heat was too hot, he wasn't going to go forward with it. The other one decided he was going to keep his boots on. But when he was asked to provide the evidence, he didn't provide the evidence. What do you expect the Director of Public Prosecution to do? So the case has to go. If you bring the evidence, it has to go. So we can't get involved in trying to manipulate the process just because things don't go the way we want it. The other area that I probably want to briefly touch is Some of the suggestions, they're quite lengthy, so I don't want to, because I must confess publicly that, and apologize, and I did apologize to her quietly and privately, that's the president of the bar, on a previous occasion, because they haven't had a response to the letter because there's so many things going on, and really, not that the response to the issues isn't important, but there are many other things that the nature of the function is that there are always things that push other things down, and that's what's happened in relation to the response, because a number of the points that were raised by the bar will be addressed, and they are addressed in the draft. It just hasn't not yet been finalized. But I can say that most of the points that they raise have either been addressed in the bill, or of course in some instances the government doesn't share their view, and as she rightly points out, they haven't had an explanation, and I guess when they receive our letter, they will get that explanation. So I apologize publicly, and for that hasn't yet happened. I take responsibility, as I usually do, where it is my where I lapse, or where maybe it's not really a lapse in some sense, but it's a circumstance, and it is what it is. I should try to, trust me, I'm trying to get that response to you, and hopefully you get it shortly. In relation to the point that was made about the potential for diluting or existing population or voter base, if, as is provided for in the bill, if the requirement for 5 years and the proposal put forward by Sir Dennis are not proceeded with. That's an argument, but whether it has much merit, for me personally, I would say it doesn't have much merit. It's an argument, but I don't think it carries much weight. And as I say, Dominica has a small population, and I think the Prime Minister touched on it. I think we need to maximize the pool of people who are intimately involved and interested in Dominica. Most Dominicans, I have siblings abroad, North America and Europe. I don't know what places, but I say with those two. And many times there are things that I get to know because they WhatsApp me. They're listening to the radios, they know what's going on, so this idea that we should just cut all these people and say they shouldn't vote, I personally do not agree with that. I see no realistic reason for it. And parties that are fearful should not be, because I see no reason why someone who's outside should necessarily support party A or party B. If you want to gain the political support of those people, whether they are inside Dominica or outside Dominica, you have to reach them in some manner. Figure out what it is that you need to do to get their interest, first of all, and then to hold their interest, so that they recognize and believe that you are best served, best placed to provide for whatever it is that they're interested in. I think we have to embrace or diasporans, for want of a better term. In fact, just to digress slightly, I think we need to, in terms of the constitutional reform that the Prime Minister talked about, I think we need to be talking about extending the pool, perhaps along the lines that St. Kitts have done, where they actually entitle grandchildren, so you go 2 generations removed, to be able to claim citizenship of their motherland through a grandparent, not simply stopping as now, where we stop at the lineage or the direct movement from a parent. And that's something I just throw out for consideration whenever we get to the stage of constitutional review. The identification cards, we're done with, or campaign finance. Yeah, I think that's probably the last major issue. Access to the media was dealt with. We've now that's accepted, and it appears in the bill, although it is quite properly confined to what the government can control, which is the government or state-owned media for now. I guess we can keep looking at others, and we may well see if private enterprise feels that it can collaborate and is prepared to facilitate, and maybe we can find a way to extend it. But I think at this current time, we really need to move forward with the things that we can do now, whilst we continue to work on the things that we would desire, but we cannot do them now. So campaign finance, I think it's critical for me to say. Prime Minister touched on it, but I don't know, in the scheme of all the talk about campaign finance, it seems to me quite clear that most people have not really paid much attention to what's going to involve. So for example, let's take this gathering here. And I was speaking to one of my colleagues on the panel earlier. The Electoral Reform Coalition is proposing a spending limit in relation to campaign finance of $50 per person per registered person in the constituency. $50. So the limit that a candidate would be able to spend is $50 times however many people who are on the list in that particular constituency. You can realize that in some constituencies that probably would not buy you a poster from DBF. The Dominica Business Forum is proposing $100 per person. So, well, again, you can see that there are two different views. So the two organizations that believe there should be campaign finance, but the level at which they're pitching it is different. So clearly, you can see that there will be a need, and you begin to see the complexity that's involved in campaign finance. And then you go to Sir Dennis. So Dennis provides at clause 55 of the House of Assembly elections bill. It provides that there will be a 10% in relation to political parties. They can spend contribution to a political party. The maximum is 10% of the aggregate of the total amount that the bill is proposing that a party can spend, which in Sir Dennis's bill is $5 billion. So 10% of that, obviously, you go with that, 500,000. In relation to the maximum contribution that can be made to a candidate, he proposes 5%, i.e. 250,000. But bear in mind, the maximum that you have is $5 billion. That's interesting. But what's more interesting is that nowhere have I seen in the bill or in the supporting annexes to that, what is the rationale that is used to come to those figures and to come to those conclusions. When I look at the Jamaica legislation, and you can go look at it yourself, it's online, 2016 Representation of the People Act of Jamaica. The Amendment Act, 2016 Amendment Act, has 5 sections, and it is that does the amendment of Representation of the People's Act and introduces the campaign finance legislation. So when you go through it, you see that a number of those provisions are reflected in what we call it, the Sir Dennis draft. But as I said, Jamaica is Jamaica. It doesn't necessarily mean that what is appropriate for Jamaica is appropriate for us. There's no explanation. The same explanation has been asked for other things. There's no explanation as to where that comes from or what it is. And therefore, I think it is important that we recognize that campaign finance is and should be a medium, if not a long-term objective. It certainly is not an immediate. So I think with those words, this whole election thing does, as I said, if I get warmed up, there's a lot I can say. But I see some signals of throats cutting. So I shall vacate the mic. Have a good evening, everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Peter, Attorney General. Ladies and gentlemen, we had anticipated to be here for just about 2 hours and 2 hours and a half. And I asked the Prime Minister whether he would be willing to take a few questions, and he said yes. But as the Speaker of the House at this time, I think I'm going to overrule. And say that I think we have had a fruitful discussion. It went a little hot, rough, Mr. Pierre. It's cool, all right, we're cool. But I think what we'll agree that the discussion today, well, they overrule me again. We'll take one question. Well, come, just give it to Bosso. I'm sure Pierre will like Bosso.
I think we should not make this issue a day on us. We are all Dominicans, whether we support that party or this other party. It is all of us discussing an issue, and we're genuinely involved and discussing the matters we think that is of importance to the country and its citizens. And I think the responsibility of the authorities who are involved is to engage in explanation. You say this, why you bring this? I say I oppose, why I oppose, and we settled. Because you get the impression that, because the Prime Minister made certain comments earlier on about we do not want Dominicans abroad to vote. That is not so. We have Dominicans abroad. I have my siblings and my 2 children lives abroad, and therefore we would like them to involve. You have a 5-year proviso that says you live out of state for more than 5 years, you ought not to come in and vote. When you can remember that, I know Jamaica now is discussing that, and they're thinking of whether they should move from 5 to 10. They're discussing it from 5 to 10. The agent made the point about, I think, this is not coming out, but I just quickly want to say there, another thing, if you are registered, oh, that's the point, and they're going to do reconfirmation, they announce some people go to the main office, and they do it on a community level where they send people out. If they come to your home, and I know Jamaica does that, and you are not there, they put a note under your door saying to you to visit the main office. And they give you a couple of days to do so. If you don't do that, you are being removed on the list. But that doesn't say you have got a chance to come back. Once you reorganize yourself, you can go back and register. So you're not off the list for life and so forth. So I think those things need to be clarified, that we are not opposed or Dominicans living abroad from voting, and we're not opposed from persons who are removed on the list to come back on the list. I just want to keep it brief that way. So I'm saying for us as Dominicans, we have to quickly try to remove they and us, right? And then we are discussing where we agree and we disagree. Sometimes we get the point that somebody wants to be famous, and they say things and everybody clap and that's it. That's not the case. The case is how well we can remedy problems that affect our country. Because when you pass laws, it's not just for you, you know. It's for generations. And I remember Norman Manley said, do not pass laws while you're in government that you can't live by when you're in opposition. Thank you.
Sorry, I would like the opportunity to say something. Prime Minister, if you don't mind? Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Prime Minister, I want to take the opportunity to thank you for your sterling presentation tonight. Masterful, excellent presentation. And for your tolerance, in spite of the Master of Ceremonies interference. But separate, that's okay, it's forgiven. I also want to thank you, Prime Minister, for the leadership that you have shown in this process. I don't want it to escape us. There are 2 big things that happened in this whole process that I want to highlight. One, we have 19 seats in the House. We could have gone to the Parliament with all 3 readings
as has been done in the past for a number of bills. After the consultations of 2023, we went through the length and breadth of Dominica. We could have settled it there. We give people the opportunity to comment further. We went to the Parliament to present the bill on the record, but to allow time for more input, more discussions, as Prime Minister has invited. So Prime Minister, I want to thank you for that, because you are giving people another opportunity to participate in the process. And to say that your declaration that no more consultation is somehow offensive to the democratic process is absolutely a nonsense. Because we are still engaged and the process is still open for comments. The second thing is, as the political leader of the Dominica Labour Party, you have shown, I don't know how to say it, you have given some concessions. Because I remember when we started, there were certain things that we said, no way. And even some of us around the table still say, no way, that we should not give that. And you said, no, we have to give something. This is a process, this is an engagement, consultation with people, and we should allow for some concessions in this. So I want to thank you for that leadership that you've shown in this process. And I will end by finally saying something. It's not a response to you, Bosso, but you said something before. The whole idea of the right to vote, I think we're still taking it too lightly. I honestly, and Graham, on that one, I'm happy that we got rid of this 5-year or 10-year residency requirement. There are 140 countries throughout the world where their citizens have the right to vote whether or not they are resident in that country once they are duly registered to vote. And these countries are the definition of democracy. We're talking about Sweden, Finland, Australia. We're not talking about countries that are struggling in democracy. Countries that have been the cradle of democracy continue to ensure that the citizens have the right to vote. And I believe that if someone decides, and the Bar Association, if someone leaves California and comes Dominica to confirm, the person is showing that they are interested in being part of the electoral process and they should have that right to vote. And no kind of disenfranchisement should be allowed. And the contradiction from the Bar Association is that they're willing that we go out there to register people. And they have an issue with people coming here to register, but they have an issue with people who are outside of Dominica voting. That is a contradiction that makes absolutely no sense. And I dare say that we must ensure that every Dominican who wants to participate in the electoral process has that right. And I want to further say, I am sorry, I am not supporting this notion about barrel and half house. You have that right because of your citizenship.
Okay, Mr.
And that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah, thank you.
That's okay.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much. Yes. This is the last intervention from the public. Yes.
Yes, a very quick comment, observation. Let me congratulate the Dominica Business Forum for putting on this discussion this evening and the attendance of the government and everybody else. When I listened to the Prime Minister, I got the impression that he was actually making his concluding debate in the Parliament on second and third reading of the bills, because he appeared not prepared to compromise as to what is before Parliament. That is the impression I got. I may be wrong, but that's the impression I got. However, it was observed that, yes, there has been concession on both sides, because the government wanted, for example, what they have put forward. The other parties wanted complete re-registration. We are going through confirmation, which I believe that is not the best way. It's time-consuming, and it could be very confusing. My very most important concern is this, that in the confirmation process, what I understand the legislation to be saying, once the bills comes into effect, if it is passed in Parliament, I say if because the people have the final say. If it is passed in Parliament, then you have, yeah, that's okay, that's okay. If it's passed in Parliament, then the existing voters list becomes the list. And there's a 25, I think 35-day period when a new list is issued. However, the legislation provides for, I think it's 12 months and an additional 3 months for confirmation. Notwithstanding, between that period, from the time the bill comes into effect and that list that is adopted from the old legislation comes into effect, the Prime Minister has the authority and the power to advise the President to issue a writ for elections. And just a minute, just a minute. And that is very concerning, in that we could end up having an election with the same list that is very beautiful. That is my comment I would like to make.
Okay, thank you very much. This is the last.
I don't want to respond because we're taking notes and so on. But the point is, the Bar Association will tell you that the Constitution is supreme law of the country, and that no law passed in Parliament can fetter the Constitution. Right. And this is why I said in my opening comments that we must not engage in delaying tactics. We need to move with haste and pass the law. The law will never be perfect. You'll never get everything you want, everything you don't want in it. There are things that are going in there that I do not support. Right? From a principle, from a fundamental standpoint, but I understand that we have the concession for us to advance the process. Okay? I told you that there are many people in my party who are at variance with me, including members of Parliament, on some points that I have imposed in a process of compromising. And this is part of the process. So, but the Constitution is unfettered. If you suggested, my dear brother, to suspend the Constitution, then say that. That's the only way you will not have the Prime Minister will not have the authority to ask for a Constitution to advise the President. And what some people are doing, so when bosses talk about them and us, we must also practice it. Now, what some people are trying to do, they're looking at when is the next election. And what they want to do is to delay the process, hoping that we will call an election or we will get to 2027, no electoral reform, and they'll tell the OAS, they'll tell the Commonwealth, they'll tell CARICOM, they'll tell OECS, look, scary, call election again and do electoral reform and so on. And hoping that those entities, as they tried in 2019, will impose a sanction on Dominica, and then there will be those who do not want to go and make a difference in people's life, become the government, and government will set aside and they will be set aside. There's a calculated attempt, Bosso. And you know it, you're a political practitioner of great repute. You're smiling, you know that. You know that, Bosso. We come from the same strategy group. That is what this guy is seeking to do, some people know. And that's why I said, if we are coming to discuss, we're coming to debate, let us come with honesty, with truth, and with transparency. I can tell you, we are open, we have taken note of all the comments, we are still sifting through the communication we received, and to see where there is merit in what some of these organizations and some individuals have said in respect to the legislation. So we're still open. This is why we deliberately, which is really unprecedented in many respects, where we go for the first reading, post the bill on the government website, and said to the country, I made a ministerial statement to the Parliament, urging Dominicans of all walks of life to study legislation, look at the bill, and make specific recommendations with regards to sections, clause that you would propose. Once you do that, we'll examine it. The AG has been instructed. There's a ministerial subcommittee on legal affairs have been instructed to look at every legal recommendation and to see to what extent we can include some of those in the legislation. And that's why in regards to the 65 years or so on, 60 years, changing of retirement age, it's an oversight on our part, and we have brought to attention. Because I thought it was in our bill. And I've directed it to the General to let us go with the amendment to increase the age of retirement for the Chief Election Officer. So where we see we can go ahead with it, we go ahead with it. But I think that those of you now who want to counter what the government is proposing, you must also acknowledge the concessions that the government has made. That is not being done. We have to acknowledge it. And when you write to the international organizations, you must say, we started there, and this is where we are now, and these are the concessions the government made, and we hope the government will make more. But to tell the international community that the government is seeking to undermine people's human rights is not nice. It's not fair, and people know me. I'm not afraid of any government, any country, any international organization. And that is why we respond to them with speed, with clarity, and they will completely alter order to write to us. And I told them so in the letter signed by the acting minister of foreign affairs. We will always stand in and defend our country. As far as we are, as small as we are, we must maintain our dignity at all times as citizens of this country. And anybody who tries to undermine our dignity as a country, we will stand in defense of our country. And so, I am here tonight. I came here in good spirit. I come here with willingness. I come here with an open mind. I come here to engage. I listened. I took note of everything. The agent took note of everything. I wrote my own handwriting. Engage and so on. So, and we're prepared to get through the comments, and we will see how it goes. But at some point, also, at some point, Mr. Baptist, we have to bring the guillotine down on consultation. And let Parliament consult. Let Parliament debate. And let us go to the committee stage and pass the law and give the authority to the Electoral Commission. Because until the Parliament gives the Electoral Commission authority to effect electoral reform, nothing can happen. Zero. And we will have to understand that we have to give and take. And we have given and we have taken as part of the process. And I have said so with the greatest sense of humility, the greatest sense of sincerity and transparency. Thank you very much.
Okay, all right. I think this brings the curtain down on the session this evening. I will just reiterate some of the points that we made earlier. Are we not supposed to close? No. We ask everybody to be respectful and we'll demand it. Yes, we will come to a close. And I will continue what I was just saying. The DBF, if you look at this flyer that we put out, we said, please join the Dominica Business Forum in its final engagement on the electoral reform matter, which it got involved in since January 2019. So tonight, we are actually bringing down the curtains on our activities, and we are allowing the politicians and those who seek power, political power, to take the fight. The only thing that we would like to recommend to say that is quite a number of things came out of tonight's discussion. And for the first time since this process started, we were able to have the Prime Minister sitting at the head table and the Attorney General together with Mr. Nicholas George, although he represents the ERC here, he is also the General Secretary of the United Workers' Party. We've got the President of the Bar Association, and we've got the President of the Dominica Business Forum. And we've got quite a number of ministers here and public servants here tonight who were exposed to the information that came out. So we in the Dominica Business Forum are pleased that we, after the 16th of December, when the Prime Minister presented the bill for the first reading in Parliament, and there was this long silence of nothing happening, and we said that let us take the opportunity, this window of opportunity, to engage, and we are very thankful that the Prime Minister and the Attorney General graced us with their presence tonight. We are very thankful, and we are also thankful for all the other officials of government. We are thankful for members of the public who came, and for the media who broadcast it live, so that those who are not here are open and exposed to the information. What we are saying is that there are some things that are still not resolved with the electoral reform process. And there must be a mechanism to put in place to see how you can bridge the gap that divide the nation on such an important matter as electoral legislation for the Commonwealth of Dominica. So when we in the Dominica Business Forum say we rest our case, we have done our work, we have spent professional hours, over 1,000 professional hours on this matter, and we thought that this was the occasion, this was the time. We cannot stop the legislation from going up, from going to Parliament for the second and third reading. All we will, at this stage, encourage, persuade, beg those who have the power to do it, is that give another listening ear and try to see if you can get to some common ground to satisfy a certain sector of the population that may not be the majority, but we do not know. But we know that any law that is passed in the Commonwealth of Dominica affects every citizen of the Commonwealth of Dominica. So we need to take this in mind, that we are not passing laws for ourselves, but we are passing laws for this generation and generations to come. So at this time, let me ask Mr. Bob to give the final vote of thanks, and we will go. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for coming. I want to thank the media for being present throughout this whole process. I want to thank the DPSU for allowing us. Thank you so much. Mr. Severin Mackenzie has said thank you to a number of other persons that I will not attempt to duplicate. But thank you, and please get home safely.
Thank you.